It is Thursday night in East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com, counting down the days, the hours, the minutes till the Michigan State-Michigan game in Ann Arbor coming up this Saturday night at Michigan Stadium. Michigan State Spartans 3-4. Been a difficult season for Michigan State thus far. A lot of challenges. Michigan State going to try to work through it and get some happiness going here as they head into the second half of the season. You all know that Michigan's ranked in the top 5, undefeated, 21-point favorite. You've seen this movie before. The movie is difficult to get to a happy ending for Michigan State, as it is in a lot of occasions. But I'm expecting Michigan State to show up and be solid, be smart, be strong, be firm, and compete with Michigan. And like I said on the Stout Show earlier today and last week, and I think I said it last week at SpartanMag Live, Michigan's good. Everybody knows that. Michigan had better not bring their C game. They'd better not bring their C game. They've done that before in this game in the past, especially when they've been, had taken a little bit too much rat poison. There's rat poison being handed out and distributed in Ann Arbor all week. And whether or not the football team is taking it, we'll have to wait and see. They shouldn't take it. They've lost to Michigan State 2 straight years. If they've ever had a season in which they should be properly motivated and focused to beat Michigan State, it should be this year. But the way Michigan State played poorly in the previous weeks, everybody has been thinking this is a foregone conclusion that Michigan's going to win. That could all work against Michigan in this game. Michigan's good. They're not great. They're good. They played great in a lot of ways against Penn State with the run game against the Penn State defense, as we said last week. That was just terrible in terms of gap integrity. And Mel Tucker talked about that on Monday in terms of the importance of being gap sound, crack and replace, gap replace, do the things you need to do to stay sound and react to Michigan's formations and gap plays and pulling linemen, getting there with some anger, some physical force, defeating blocks, stacking it up. I think Michigan State's capable of doing that. Michigan State's defense statistically has been terrible this year. Pretty good against Wisconsin. Wrote an article about that in SpartanMag, SpartanMag.com earlier today about the importance of stopping the run. That's where this game starts. Talked about it in the VCast this week over at SpartanMag.com. By the way, if you don't know what all this nonsense is, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Go over to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. We'd love to have you become a magger over there. Been around since the beginning of the internet. And we have a lot of friends over there, and we try to provide unmatched, unique coverage of Michigan State football, basketball, and recruiting. Paul Konerdijk, my associate editor, doing a great job for a number of years, more than 15 years. SpartanMag.com, Paul Konerdijk. Noah Sprunger, great job as intern. Jake Laskawa, great job as intern. Jason Killip, great job as the recruiting anchor. Ricardo Cooney, great job as senior writer. SpartanMag.com, go over there. Check out the Underground Bunker message board. Underground Bunker message board is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports, the daily narrative. That's where all the great Michigan State fans from all over the planet congregate to talk about Michigan State football, basketball, recruiting, and maybe buying television sets or real estate in the Petoskey area. Talk about everything there. And it's a group of friends that don't always see eye to eye, but those people are coming at life and the world at a similar angle, and it's a good place for Michigan State fans to congregate and talk about the ups and downs of Michigan State sports. We will see if there's going to be ups this weekend, Saturday in Ann Arbor. Nobody's expecting it, but we're going to find out what happens. Michigan State is expecting to win. I can tell you that just by looking at Harlan Barnett, Peyton Thorne, Mel Tucker. That's the way athletes are. They're expected to win, right? But especially this game. They've beaten these guys two years in a row. A couple of years ago, they're 21-point underdogs. Went out there, beat them 27-24. Athletes always believe in themselves. But there's some times when some teams go off the ledge a little bit and lose confidence, and they kind of hope for the best. And I kind of think that's the way Michigan State's been with Ohio State in recent years. I don't know if Michigan State's going to win this game. I think Michigan's got the best chance to win. No surprise there. But I'm just telling you, Michigan State is expecting to win this game. Check out the YouTube site here. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. If you get a chance later tonight or tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, before the game, whatever it is, check out the Harlan Barnett interview from the press conference earlier this week. He's talking about the Michigan State game. He's asked about it. And just look how reserved he is, how he struggles to not say what he really thinks. And he says he keeps thinking about no billboard materials, he says, or bulletin board material. Trying not to say anything that would be bulletin board material or disrespectful to Michigan. Michigan's a talented team. Better chance to beat them is letting sleeping dogs lie. They've got plenty of bulletin board material dating back to last year and some of the things Xavier Henderson said after that game. Xavier Henderson, good, smart, respectable individual, but he spouted off after that victory. And in so many words said, what are they going to say now? What are they going to say now? Because he felt disrespected that few people gave Michigan State a chance to win. Now, Xavier Henderson was a senior last year, probably thought that was his last meeting ever with Michigan. Turns out he came back this year, so now he's got to face him again this year. And I'm sure that he will hear about it on the field. He probably knows that. He's been on the field a few times with them. But Michigan needs that. They need some bulletin board material in this game a lot of times in order to get focused. They've lost 10 out of 14. They've lost 2 in a row. They shouldn't need bulletin board material. But with Michigan winning these games and blowing out Penn State and beating Indiana and beating Hawaii and Colorado State and UConn and Lawrence Tech and Grand Valley and Wayne State and Madonna College, having beaten those teams, they do and have a chance to get full of themselves. I'm not saying that this Michigan team is as much of the, prima donna aspects to their team as has been the case in the past. They don't really have that high diva quotient, I don't think. They got rid of it a little bit last year. I thought Hassan Haskins was a real good leader for them, and they had some other leaders, and they were a lunch pail, lunch bucket type of team, and they won a Big Ten title. So, some of the things that have haunted Michigan as a program in the past, I'm not sure are part of it right now. And I give Harbaugh credit. I mean, Harbaugh, he's, as a person, he's childish. We all know that. Extremely childish. He stayed quiet there for a couple of years when they were on hard times. But, I thought the team quit on him during the COVID year when they were blown out by Wisconsin, and then they didn't play Michigan. And that's very strange circumstances that year. They kind of had some COVID opt-outs in hockey. Didn't want to play Western Michigan in the GLI. They're not even playing in the GLI anymore. But that year, the COVID year, if they'd have played Iowa, they'd have gotten steamrolled by Iowa. If they'd have played Ohio State would have scored as many as they wanted, and they would have been, 2-6. I'm not sure Harbaugh would have survived that. There's a lot of grumbling going on, and he was smart to chicken out of that game. But the part that impresses me and surprises me is that they were able to take – I thought that he had lost the team. And usually if someone loses the team, there's no getting it back. The next year they came back and were quite strong in 2021 when the Big Ten championship went to the college football playoff. I never would have thought that would have been probable or possible based on the disposition of that team in 2020 during the COVID year. Of course, that year, Michigan was a 21.5-point favorite. Michigan State won that game 27-24. It was kind of an hilarious game for Michigan State fans. Rocky Lombardi played that game, and that was the game of his life. Accurate with the deep ball. Didn't know he could play that well. Ricky White was great. They could really use Ricky White this week also. But he's been gone for a couple of years. But Rocky Lombardi showed up that week, played like we didn't know he could. Talked about that on the Stout Show today as well. When Michigan State's won this game, there have been times when Michigan State's quarterback has gone out there and played like we didn't know he can. That includes Tony Banks, 1995. Tony Banks went on to become an NFL quarterback. We didn't really know he was an NFL quarterback at that time. Bill Burke threw for over 400 yards in 1999, outdueling the Tom Brady and Drew Henson tag team. Burke, good, solid, excellent quarterback, top 10 team for Michigan in 1999, but we didn't know he's capable of that. That was a shootout type of game. Burke really came to the forefront of that. Now, can Michigan State get that kind of play from Peyton Thorne? That's one of the things they're going to need. Michigan's pass defense has been good. It's not as confrontational as it's been in the past. In the past, Michigan's done a really good job of really getting hands on their wide receivers and being handsy and just, getting on top and really impeding the progress of receivers down the field. Once the ball's in the air, you're not supposed to have contact. And in recent years, Michigan has really pushed that rule to the aggravation of a lot of opponents. Watching Michigan this year, they'll do that a little bit on third downs. First and second down, they might press one guy, but it's a lot of off coverage, off man-to-man and zone. They're not as in your grill press coverage this year as they've been in the past. Now they can change that on Saturday. Going back to previous years, 3 or 4 coaches ago, I remember, Michigan would be kind of vanilla on defense. Then when they would take on Joe Tiller's team, they'd get up and press all over the place. Completely different era. But some of the things that they do these days do harken back to past Michigan teams. But not seeing as much press coverage. I think there's underneath routes available at times. Not a lot of teams have had a lot of success throwing the ball against them yet. Clifford for Penn State was like 9 out of 16 or 17. He's never been a real good quarterback, but not a good day for him. Indiana had success with their tempo, 3, 4, 5 receivers. with the tempo a couple of times. It's a bubble screens, getting into getting into a rhythm. Could Michigan State do any of that? That's not what Michigan State does. They do some tempo a little bit after a first down. If Michigan State were to try something like that, it would, during the bye week, it would have to be installed. And it's hard to change your stripes that way. But Michigan had trouble with that against the Hoosiers. Their quarterback had thrown for like 160 by halftime, but they couldn't keep it up in the second half. But that game was tight, late in the third quarter, fourth quarter. Not a very good Indiana team, but they did some decent things. They turned over McCarthy on a red zone interception, cover 2, and they had a linebacker who transferred from Miami, number 5, with pretty good speed. Took on Ronnie Bell to the deep middle, ran with him, tipped it, interception in the back of the end zone. The safety got it, but the linebacker ran with the number 3 receiver. On that play, Michigan had 5 wide receivers. This is what they can do with personnel. They can load up with tight ends, 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, sometimes 3 tight ends. But for the most part, the 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 back. That's what they do. On this play, they were empty, but 5 receivers, so to speak, 5 wideouts on this interception by McCarthy in the red zone. One of the receivers was a tight end, split out wide. The other receiver was Donovan Edwards, a running back who can play wide receiver. Very versatile athlete. His ability to play wide receiver is going to make him a lot of money someday. Donovan Edwards in news for other reasons earlier today, regrettably, for mankind. But anyway, Michigan, 5 receivers and 3 receivers to the right, the widest of which was the tight end, who's slower, Schoonmaker, and not a threat to do much downfield. Can't remember who the number 2 receiver is. The number 3 receiver, the third receiver from the inside, was Ronnie Bell, and he was the primary receiver on this. So it's 5 wide. Their top receiver is the innermost receiver, and that it's cover 2, so he's picking up a linebacker. Cover 2 zone, you have corner way out there, and 2 safeties deep. So a third receiver, and here's Ronnie Bell. He's getting picked up by an inside defender, a linebacker, a slower guy. But that linebacker, number 5, transfer from Miami, can run real well. That Ronnie Bell goes straight to the seam, to the goalpost. Linebacker turns and runs with him to the deep middle. Kind of like a Tampa 2 type of thing, man match situation. And that linebacker ran with Ronnie Bell and got a hand on it. Interception in the red zone. Michigan's red zone offense, not very good. The first half against Penn State was better in the second half as Penn State began to quit. Red zone offense, not very good against Michigan State last year. That's a big reason why Michigan State stayed in it and ended up winning that game late. Red zone offense, not so good against Indiana through the first 2/3 of that game, including that interception. Not really a bad decision by McCarthy on that. It was 2nd and 8. But red zone offense, I'm sure, is something Michigan's been working on. It's something that hurt them last year against Michigan State. They've had a very good season this year, but red zone offense has been a problem. When something's been a problem, you know that a team will focus on it and probably show some improvement in that area. So that's a little bit of a scary situation for Michigan State in some ways. In some ways, it could be a good thing if red zone offense is a little wonky. But if Michigan is improving it or been working on it and focused on it, that'll make it that much harder for Michigan State's red zone defense to do their job to keep Michigan State in this game. You guys all know that, you're Michigan State fans. You know that the Spartans have kind of been up against it a few times like this. Looks like this in the past. We're talking about the microphone. I don't know what it is. It's one of the. It's a pretty good one. I don't know what it's called though. What do we have here? We're getting a little funny with the lighting. I don't know. But anyway, underdogs are these Spartans, and we'll be talking about that throughout the evening, and we'll get into that. We got about 15 questions or so from the mailbag. We're hoping to hear from Big Mooby. Big Mooby is doing some work. He's on the road a little bit, and he said yesterday he could come on today around 9:30, which is in about 10 minutes, but I tried to reconfirm that with him about an hour and a half ago. I have not heard back from him, but he has the phone number, hoping to hear from Big Mooby to get his thoughts on Michigan versus Michigan State. This is always a very carnivorous week for Big Mooby. And we're hoping he's doing well wherever he is. Go ahead and ask questions over there in the comment area. We will get to those in a moment. All right, go question number 1. Go to Ryan from Jacktown. I assume that's Jackson, Michigan. Ryan says, what is the single most important thing Michigan State has to do to be in the ball game going into the fourth quarter on Saturday? First of all, I like the way Ryan thinks. He's talking about how, what Michigan State needs to do to stay competitive getting into the fourth quarter. And if Michigan State gets into the fourth quarter competitively, then the pressure goes on to Michigan, and the adrenaline raises up for Michigan State. I don't know that scientifically. I don't have the data on that, but if you've been around this rivalry long enough, you've seen it. What do they have to do? They got to contain the run. We've been talking about that last week in the VCast, this week in the VCast, last week SpartanMag Live, today an article at SpartanMag.com. Contain the run, contain the run, and contain the run. Michigan very, very good with the ground game last week against Penn State. 416 yards rushing, excellent. Penn State, not so good. Michigan was physical, but it's not like Michigan State just steamrolled them. It was a lot. In a lot of cases, it was a situation where Penn State didn't show up for gap responsibility. And those two running backs, to their credit, Corum and Donovan Edwards, they don't need much daylight, and it's home run to the house. So contain the run. Contain the run. Last year, Michigan State held Corum to 3.5 yards per carry, 45 yards total. They held Haskins to 4.2 yards per carry, 59 yards total for those guys. A couple of quarterback runs were in there a little bit, but if Michigan had been able to run the ball better last year, they would have put a nail in the coffin and gone ahead and won that game. Because Michigan State stopped the run, they kept a foot in the door to get that comeback. Stopped the run in the red zone, forced field goals. Have to do that again. Indiana stopped the run against Michigan. They gave up one to Blake Corum, 50-yarder down to the 1-yard line in the first quarter. Might have been the opening drive of the game, 7-0 lead. On that one, I think it was an outside zone. Guy over pursued it. But Indiana had 4 guys around him, 4 defenders around Corum. Vision, cut, missed a tackle, 50 yards to the 1-yard line. Michigan State needs to make sure that they do not give up that type of 50-yard long one. When you get 4 people around them, get them on the ground. In an intensity type of game like this, rivalry game, Michigan State all ramped up, amped up. Tucker talking about gang tackling, gap responsibility, forming a human arrow to the ball, all those things. Sounds good, and that's what they need to do, but in games like this, you've seen Michigan State's defense take it up a notch. I remember seeing Josh Thornhill, very good player at Michigan State, had a very good career at Michigan State. But late in his career, I don't remember if it was his junior year, senior year, it might have been 1999. He'd always been pretty good, but Thornhill against Michigan was just a notch quicker, like visibly quicker. Like, whoa. And you see that across the board. And when you get an 85-man Army, well, I guess about 65-man Army. I don't know how many people travel. You get a 65-man Army and everybody's another 10% more intense and more willing to pay the physical price. It can be a difficult Army to defeat. It's up to Michigan to match that and not bring their C game. If they don't bring their C game and they don't quite match Michigan State's intensity, they can find themselves in a real tough game here. So I've got some question marks going on here. What's going on? All right, so let me keep an eye here on a couple things. All right. I'm just checking a couple things. I don't have my producer here to keep an eye on things, so I was doing some house cleaning there. Everything looks pretty good there, but Michigan State's got to contain that run. Going to be very hard to do. I do think that, and I've talked about this last week and all week, Michigan State's defensive tackles are good. I was watching Iowa's defensive tackles. Iowa's defensive tackles are not the usual Iowa defensive tackles. They're 6'5", 275, 6'5", 275, both of them. They were getting moved by Michigan double teams. Indiana had a guy 315 pounds, number 50. Can't remember his name, not important. But there was a time when he took on Olu Olotimi, who's a good center for Michigan, but took him on, displaced it a little bit, got off, and made a key stop at one point. Michigan ran the ball pretty well against Indiana, but that guy was a little bit of a headache for them, 315 pounds. Michigan State doesn't have 275-pound defensive ends. They're not 275. Barrow is what? 305. Maverick Hansen, 305, 310. Derek Harmon, 315, 320. And, Jacob Slade, 3'5", 310. These are good defensive tackles, big defensive tackles, and they're deep enough they'll be rotating in there. I'm not guaranteeing Michigan State will stop the run, but Michigan, I don't think Michigan down in and down out is going to be able to go inside against those defensive tackles. I think they're going to meet some resistance there. Maybe Michigan will rise to the occasion and play even better on the ground game than they did against Penn State. I'm not sure. But if Michigan does it, they will have done it against the best pair of defensive tackles they face this year, I promise. Michigan State's defensive ends, we talked about this last week. They've had some injuries there, might get some people back, might not sure, but Michigan State needs to get better at defensive end. Deshaun Mallory playing out there defensive end, former defensive tackle. He's been sturdy there. He doesn't give you a whole lot in terms of pass rush. Deshaun Mallory does not, but he's a senior, former defensive tackle, slimmed down to 280. His pursuit speed's not been bad, but most importantly, he's firm at the point of attack. So that defensive end, when Mallory's on the field, is solid. Again, not great pass rush, but stopping the run is priority one. Solid with that. Fletcher coming in after getting the spearing penalty against Wisconsin, targeting, whatever you want to call it. Not the biggest, most physically rotund guy, but someone from the Flint area. In-state game means a lot to him. His role has been increasing the last couple of weeks. He's going to be fired up. He's wiry, strong. He should be solid at the point of attack. Doesn't mean he's not going to get beat a couple times, but he's not weak there. Zion Young, true freshman, is okay here and there, but he's a true freshman. Avery Dunn was terrible at the point of attack against Minnesota, was a little bit better the following week, a little bit better the next week. Then we didn't see him for a couple of weeks, but he's become functional. Not sure about Petrowski or Bogle. Bogle was very good against the run. Not a great pass rusher, but he's good against the run. Could have used him in this game. Not sure that's going to happen. But we've been over that. Talked about it last week. Kendall Brooks, if he's back at safety, if you have Kendall Brooks and Xavier Henderson back there at safety positions, that'll be a look that Michigan State has never, ever, ever used before. 215-pound safety in Brooks, 210-pound safety in Henderson. Those guys come in, and they lay the wood pretty good. Jacoby Windman playing middle linebacker now for the first time. Much better than Van Sumeren was. And Windman enjoys playing with Henderson. Just the communication, it's different. As bad as the defense was against Minnesota, you didn't have Windman at middle linebacker, you didn't have Henderson on the field, didn't have Slade on the field. We mentioned Avery Dunn playing a lot of snaps. That game wasn't ready for prime time. That was not good. Secondly, Michigan State telegraphed everything, did not disguise everything. It was so easy for Minnesota to operate. That defense that was so bad against Minnesota does not exist anymore. Maybe Michigan comes out and scores 40 points on it anyway. If they do, credit to them, give them an exclamation point. They are for real if they can do that. Michigan State has not been good this season. They've not been good this season, but I think Michigan State will come in and throw, for better or for worse, they'll throw some haymakers on Saturday. They'll show up with some physicality. If Michigan takes them apart, good for them. But if Michigan beats Michigan State, they will have beaten, I think, they will have beaten a team that is better than its record at this point. That's just the defensive side of the ball. To stay in the game, you got to stop the run, not give up the big plays. Red zone defense, and Michigan's going to be trying to score touchdowns instead of kicking field goals. Last year, Michigan kicked a lot of field goals, kicked a few field goals on some fourth and manageable situations. Looking back at it, I'm sure that Harbaugh wishes he'd gone for it on fourth down a couple of times. This game, might he be more inclined to go for it in those situations? Maybe Michigan State would welcome that. I don't know. Pass defense, of course, last year, Michigan destroyed Michigan State through the air. Everybody did. And a lot of teams destroyed Michigan State through the air through most of this season. With Henderson back, pass defense, I think, is going to be a little bit better than it was 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Amir Speed is still a guy that does not have great agility, but Michigan's receivers are good. Rodney Bell, Cornelius Johnson. Who's the other one? The tight end is a ball control possession type of guy. The kid from East Lansing's not been playing much. He has not had more than one reception in the game since last year's game. All right, who is Cornelius Johnson? Oh, Roman Wilson. Those guys are good, and Roman Wilson got open deep 3 times against Maryland, but McCarthy overthrew him 3 times. Ronnie Bell's been good this year. Had a 16-yard touchdown on a reverse against Iowa. Had 5 catches, 39 yards against Penn State. Cornelius Johnson, 3 catches for 43 yards against Penn State. Cornelius Johnson dropped a 15-yard out against Indiana. Came back a few moments later and man-to-man on a crossing route, 29-yard touchdown. Got matched up in man-to-man. Had a little rub route situation going on there. Those receivers look like they're pretty talented, but they're not like, from what I've seen, they're not like scary talented wide receivers. Not guys that can really threaten taking the top off of defense, because Michigan doesn't really operate that way. From what I've seen, McCarthy drops back and reads from short to long, and usually the short is open, and usually he goes short. And we talked about that last week, that he is in passes of less than 10 yards. He's 111 out of 144. I'm sorry, he's 85 of 94 on passes that are not more than 10 yards downfield, past the line of scrimmage. He's been accurate with those. He is accurate with those. He's good. He's solid. But he reads short. If keep it in front and tackle, bend but don't break, get into the red zone, make them kick field goals can be part of it. But the receivers don't really scare me if I'm an opponent yet. That being said, at this time last year, I was making the point that Cade McNamara rarely threw downfield. McNamara went into that game. This is how many yards McNamara threw for prior to the Michigan State game. 136 against Western Michigan, 44 against Washington, 191 against Northern Illinois on 8 of 11 passing, 163 against Rutgers, 9 of 16, 197 against Wisconsin, 17 of 28, 129 against Nebraska on 20 completions. They were fortunate to beat Nebraska last year. That was McNamara. Very vanilla, very lukewarm, room temperature, wasn't completing much downfield. Came in against Michigan State, downfield, and of course threw for 383 yards, 28 of 44. They attacked Angelo Gross a lot. Angelo Gross was a safety at the time. When they played man-to-man, they went looking for him. Angelo Gross, I suspect in this game, if he plays, he'll be more of a nickel guy. I think the safeties will be Henderson. Will it be Henderson and Mangum or Henderson and Kendall Brooks maybe? Henderson and Dylan Tatum? I don't know. Maybe it will be Henderson and Gross. I don't know. Gross has struggled a little bit with some deep ball judgment. If he's at safety, maybe he comes in and is robber on those situations. He was a robber a few times against Wisconsin, did it pretty well. That was something a little bit new for him. But, I mean, Michigan attacked through the air, something McNamara had not shown. So in this game, is there a chance McCarthy comes in here, having not attacked deep or intermediate deep a whole lot this season? Hasn't had to. Will they try to go on the offensive that way through the air? I don't know. That's one of the things to look for, and I'll be interested to find out what happens there. All right, I've already talked too much. Let's go over here to the comments area. Let's see who we got. All right, Zach Coleman says, great to see you, Jim. Thank you, Zach. Rob South says, what's up, Phillips? Brad Fashenko checking in from Austin, Texas. Dog Kenneth says, hello, friends. Joe Marsh says, hello, comp, and go green. So you got Rob South running the point. Zach's the 3. Brad Fashenko is the big man in the middle for this game. Dog Kenneth, he's the 2. Joe Marsh is the stretch 4 with that American flag. Appreciate Joe Marsh. Gordon Sonota says, hello from Albany, Georgia. Aaron Snow says, recruits are jumping ship. No bueno. That's true. Michigan State had a decommitment from Kendrick Riscano. I've heard it pronounced Risano. I've heard it pronounced Risano by people in Houston. I should know that, but I don't. But he decommitted today. There have been signs that it was heading in that direction in recent weeks. 4-star recruit number 184 running back in the country. So that's a tough one for Michigan State. Rumor has it A&M is in there and some others. He says Michigan State is going to continue to be one of his top schools, but usually when someone decommits, they rarely recommit, right? So Michigan State's in on some other running backs. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Gordon Sonota says, Jim, I was unable to find your email address. All right. Gordon wanted to ask me about something. What was it? Can't remember. All right, I'll remind me on the Underground Bunker message board, Gordon, and I'll post it over there. Fleet says, clocked in Hermano. JD says, go green. Stu Redmond says, yo. Bruce Main. I need to know how to pronounce that. Is it Bruce Main, like M-A-I-N? Let me know, Bruce. Bruce Main says, how we feeling, folks? Josh Elke says, checking in from Clarkston. Old Tuck, the bell cow is here. Old Tuck from Austin, Texas, by way of Ludington, Michigan. Gordon Sonota says, what was the anti-Semitic tweet the Michigan player had? That was Donovan Edwards, and it wasn't a tweet. He just retweeted something that Kanye West had tweeted that was anti-Semitic, unfortunately. So I heard there was a release from the University of Michigan from one of their regents who said that they spoke with Harbaugh and the player, and they plan to go to, I'm sorry if I'm not saying this right, but I think there's a Holocaust museum in Southfield. I should know that. And they're planning to take him there during the offseason, which will be good, and he'll get some education there. And he's a young guy. He's a public figure, so it's horrible that he said these things. But, I think back to some things when I heard when I was 19, some of the things that Eddie Murphy and Sam Kinison used to say that we thought was funny that's not funny anymore. Not funny now that I'm older and wiser, but when you're 19 and stupid, and a lot of us were stupid when we were 19, but he'll get an education on that. And that goes beyond football. I don't know, Michigan football, that makes Michigan football look bad. It makes society, it's just not good, right? But I think that, that's going to get fixed outside of football. I'm just talking about a human being as a citizen of this planet. All right, Gordon, let's see. Sea-Dog says, can't blame X for that. It is hard for true Spartans to contain their hatred for the arrogant a-holes in Ann Arbor. Sea-Dog, some colorful commentary there. Bob Littleton says, I don't know what it is, but I just have a really good feeling about this game. Well, Bob, you know what it is because you've seen it happen before. Just 2 years ago, 21-point underdog, Michigan State won 27-24. 2017, Michigan was favored by 10 to 13 points, and that was Lewerke's sophomore year. I think Michigan State won 14-10. That was the rain delay game. Michigan's quarterback was O'Korn. Anyone remember that? Threw 3 interceptions. They're favored by 2 touchdowns. 10 points to 2 touchdowns. Lewerke only threw for 94 yards, but he didn't make the big mistakes. Michigan State rushed for 158. Madre London had a 50-yard run in that game. I don't really remember that. Michigan State held Michigan to 102 yards rushing, holding a Harbaugh team to 102 yards rushing. Joe Bocci, an interception. Was it Dowell had 2 interceptions also. A year prior to that, in 2016, when Michigan State went 3-9, terrible season for Michigan State. Had injuries. They were not very talented. A lot of division on that particular team, 2016. And Michigan was favored by 24, maybe rightly so. Michigan was pretty good. But Michigan State, opening drive, run ball, touchdown, 7-0 in Spartan Stadium. Michigan came back and won. They were the better team. Michigan won that game 32-23, won by 9 points. They were favored by 24. Terrible Michigan State team. But so you've seen that. I mean, if you've been around long enough, you've seen it happen. You know, all those, you know, some of those famous Michigan State wins. Even in 1987, when Michigan State went to the Rose Bowl, you know, Michigan was favored in that team. 1990, Michigan was number 1 in the country. Michigan State came out of the tunnel that day, and Perlis's team didn't do a whole lot of demonstrative, you know, taunting and so forth. But that game, I was there covering that game as a student at Michigan State at the time. Michigan State came out of the tunnel, and a few of them, you know, like spilled out near midfield, and we're telling Michigan, you know, you got, you know, pointing at them. Dwayne Young, who ended up being an NFL tight end, pointing and basically saying, you know, what do athletes say? You know, we're taking you guys down today. Or words maybe less clean than that. But that was kind of strange for Michigan State to do that. But Michigan State came out, and they were tough. And Michigan was good. That was the Eddie Brown game. Talking about that in the Stout Show last week, too. Eddie Brown tripped Desmond Howard, but Desmond Howard still had a chance to catch the ball. If he catches the ball, that whole thing changes, right? He didn't hold on to it. Was there a flag? Yeah, it should have been a flag, yes. But catch the ball, and Michigan doesn't have a problem, and they don't have anything to complain about for 32 years. But if they had thrown a flag, it would have been, was that a 2-point conversion? Is that what that was? Then they would have had 2-point conversion at the 1.5-yard line. Earlier in that game, Michigan had a 4th and goal, I think, at the 1-yard line. It was a 4th and 1 inside the 5. Might have been 4th and goal at the 1-foot line. Michigan did against Michigan State. And you know what happened, of course. Michigan scored on that play, right? No, they didn't. Michigan State stopped them, 4th and goal at the 1-yard line earlier in that game. So if Michigan State had already stopped Michigan at the goal line on 4th and 1 earlier in that game, what makes people think 32 years later there was a foregone conclusion that if they would have had another snap in 1990 that they would have scored? I think we saw that play out earlier in the game, and there's no guarantee, but the unknown's undefeated. But if he just catches the ball, it's not a problem. Anyway, Michigan State was a big underdog in that game, and Michigan State was excellent that day. Michigan was good, too, that day. That was a great football game. But the reason, Bob Littleton, that you've got a funny feeling about this game is because you've seen it happen before. Question is whether Michigan can play their A game and let all that stuff to the side and just play their game and take care of business. For that reason, this is Michigan's game to lose if they want to lose it. They're the better team to this point. I'm going to go ahead and throw a tweet out there to let people know this is going on. So give me a second and bear with me. Appreciate everybody checking us out here at SpartanMag.com. Give us a thumbs up. Become a subscriber. Go to SpartanMag.com and consider becoming a subscriber over there. Have a lot of free content over there you can appreciate. For that reason, this is Michigan's game to lose if they want to lose it. Michigan State basketball practice today at Breslin Center. Talked to Izzo. That video I took, it's on this channel elsewhere. Check that out later tonight if you want, or today. Izzo talking about the exhibition Michigan State had at Tennessee this weekend. Matty Sissoko continues to look. He's coming along at the center position. Now he's got to do it when games begin, but He's moving well. He's bigger. He's thicker. Running up and down the court well. Very good in ball screen defense, which is the key thing to get playing time. They've been working on him about not going over people's backs to get rebounds and to not foul. But he's playing well enough that if and when he gets in foul trouble, you're going to miss him. So that's a compliment to him. He's making progress. And they're rallying around him. He's doing some good things. Let me post this in Twitter. Let me tweet it, I guess is the verb. So actually the link was kind of convoluted. Let me try this again. Once again, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate that. See if this one's any better. A little better. Okay, there we go. Now, another question here. Let's go to question number 2. Actually, let's go to the guy with the cat head here. Looks like a Michigan fan. Looks like a well-behaved, nice Michigan fan. He says his name's Excellent Eric. All right, we got our eye on him. He's fired up about football. Good American, I'm sure. Hi, Bob. I feel really good about this game, too, except I'm a Michigan fan. Mr. Bowman says, hello, guy. Sea-Dog says, if Michigan State wins this one, Tucker should get a lifetime contract. He's got a smile on his face. He doesn't really mean it, I don't think. Jeff Smith says, love your videos. Jim, what kind of microphone is that? We talked about that earlier. RE320. I can't remember, but I researched it a few, last year and got it, and it's been pretty good. Last week, we had a little problem with the audio, had a little trouble with the snap. I switched a couple things, and I think we're better this week. But I appreciate those of you who said there were problems last week. I apologize about that. Zach Coleman said, is there any word on Kendall Brooks? If he is back, what does the starting secondary look like? Which linebackers do you think will start? Maybe Brule for the 4-3. Good question, Zach. I'm wondering that too. Kendall Brooks was a good heavy-hitting safety through the first 5 or 6 games. Did not play against Wisconsin. Jaden Mangum had gotten knocked out of the game a week earlier against Ohio State, so he was not available. So Michigan State began with Angelo Gross at safety and Brule at nickelback. So Michigan State had a linebacker, 240-pound Aaron Brule, playing nickel rather than a defensive back. The nickel had been a defensive back type of guy through the most of the season, starting with Chester Kimbrough, Justin White, Angelo Gross a little bit. And then they put Brule in there to play Wisconsin because they're a bigger personnel team. So last year, Gross was at safety, or last week, Gross and Henderson were at safety with Henderson being back. And Brule at the nickel. So if Kendall Brooks is back, that's a great question. Does he play, he and Henderson, can they flip-flop free and strong? Yes, they can. Like I said, I'm sure they've played together in practice before, but we've never seen it in public. And they're two big, physical, experienced safeties. I frankly want to see what that looks like. Kendall Brooks and Henderson might be good, might be shaky. I don't know. It's probably going to be pretty good. So you're wondering if Michigan State will start with a 4-3. I think Michigan State will start with their defense. It'll match up with whatever Michigan has. I'm expecting Michigan to begin with 3 receivers and 1 tight end and 1 back. If Michigan's in 3 receivers, I think Michigan State probably does not start with Brule. I think they'll probably start with Gross at nickel to have more of a pass defense, a quicker guy in the slot area. And I think Michigan State will go to the 4-3 with Brule when Michigan brings in a second tight end. I think it's going to be like that the entire game. It's my guess. And it's good for a defense to have that kind of versatility, and Michigan will sub people out in order to do that. And if they sub people out, then the defense has time to get set. Those are the rules these days. Gordon Sonoda says, it looks like from American Bandstand. Is this what Dick Clark used to have, an American Bandstand? I remember Dick Clark with one of those long, microphones like Gene Rayburn on Match Game. That's what I remember Dick Clark having in the great old American Bandstand. John Elke says, win or lose, I really want to see this team go toe-to-toe the whole game and use this game as a stepping stone for the rest of the year and beyond. John Elke with a great post. I like what John Elke says there, and I think that is a good way to look at it. And I'm kind of, as I observe Michigan State and cover them, I agree with you. I'm in agreement that if Michigan State plays well, that'll be a good sign heading toward the next week to play Illinois. Illinois is a good team, number one defense in the country right now statistically. I don't think they're actually the best defense in the country, but statistically they are. But they are good. That defensive line is good. They do good things. Running back is fast, and they got a good RPO game. And DeVito is a good quarterback. It's good. Illinois is a good team. Illinois is going to stumble to somebody, I think. Being able to handle success week after week, that's going to be a challenge for them. Someone's going to jump up and bite them, and it could be Michigan State. If Michigan State plays well this week, that'll be an indicator that things are kind of, getting back together, not only for this team in the season, but for the program. You want to see that the program, that the team is not as inept as they looked against Minnesota and part of the Washington game. You want to see that they're actually, playing a progressive level of football where they're improving week to week and just doing fundamental things better. And if they play well in this game and can continue and carry that on and move forward, merely getting to 6-6 and beating either Illinois or Penn State and then beating Indiana and Rutgers and getting to 6 wins would be. It's not great to go to the Quick Lane Bowl or wherever they go, but it'd be nice if you're following Michigan State as a program to see them show some late season progress. You don't want to see it just fizzle out. If you're an old enough fan, you've seen that happen in the past. But I agree with you. If they lose this game, but look pretty good, that might not be a bad sign for the rest of the season and the future. I hear what you're saying. Excellent Eric says, if Michigan State wants to win the turnover battle, stop Michigan in the red zone, figure out a way to stop the run, and try to make Michigan win through the air. I would agree with that. That's an interesting point about trying to make Michigan win through the air. I kind of, we'll write the pre-snap read for Friday for tomorrow. I'll go back and look to see what Michigan did. I'll chart their opening script in each of their last few games. They went to the air to begin the Indiana game. I think they're likely to do that. They kind of did that last. I'll have to go back and look to see what they did against Michigan State. Of course, they eventually went to the air with a lot of damage. But I kind of, I'm really not sure what Michigan's going to do at the outset of the game. I think Michigan might be smarter to go to the air and attack through the air because that's where Michigan State is weaker. But Michigan's strength has been the ground game. But I think Michigan State's strength on defense is stopping the run. Deceptively so. If you're Michigan State, you're like, yeah, try to bring the run. And the run game is good. And Michigan might rush for 250. I don't know. But if you're Michigan State and you're going to win this game, you want Michigan to try to the run and try it and try it and try it. And the clock to run and run and run and run and run, which shortens the game, reduces the possessions. You want them to keep trying to run and you want to stop it. Even if you give up a few first downs, don't want to do that, but if I'm Michigan State, that's the poison I want them to pick. Now, if you're Michigan State, do you sell out with one safety deep with an extra man in the box to stop the run? I don't think so. I think Michigan State starts out with 2 safeties deep to see if they can stop the run with a standard number. If they can stop the run or contain the run with a standard number, that gives them another defender back there to try to close some of the windows in the pass game. As it turns out, they might need to commit the extra guy to the box to stop the run. That's not ideal, but they might have to do that. Now, Michigan, if you put an extra guy in the box, they'll check with me at the line of scrimmage and change their play here and there. But they've been, a little bit guarded on giving McCarthy too much leash here and there. McCarthy's going to be very good someday, but it seems like they're trying to keep a shorter leash on him. So I agree with what excellent Eric says that if the Michigan State's best way to stop the run and make them do it through the air. Now, last year I said the same thing. I've been over this before. I thought that last year Michigan State would have to do that with McNamara, make McNamara prove he can do it, and I had my doubts, but McNamara proved me wrong. Threw for 380. McCarthy hasn't done it yet. He's had really good numbers completion-wise, but he hasn't had to have, that 350 passing game. Will they do it in this game? Do they need to? Maybe not. Maybe they won't need to. Does Michigan want to tempt fate and put it in the air that much? Maybe they don't. Maybe they want to stay with the safer, more tried and true for them mode of operation. That is the run game. It's going to be interesting. Excellent Aaron says, although the condition of the secondary, I'm not sure that would be enough in and of itself. Yeah, Michigan State secondary, it's not been good statistically. The corners, Brantley's pretty good here and there. Amir Speed has been shaky. Having Henderson back there will help. Linebacker coverage was a big part of the pass defense problem in September. With Windman in there, it's a little bit better. Brule's pretty good with his drops. Halliday's okay. But it's better against the run and the pass with Windman there. Pass rush is not as good, but Windman's success in the pass rush had kind of dried up anyway. Let's go back to the mailbag. Griff in Hill Valley, California says, what are you hearing on the injury front? Who should we expect back for the Michigan game? I'm not hearing anything. And even if I heard something, it'd probably be somebody who is kind of sworn to secrecy. Not sworn to secrecy, but keep it a little bit quiet. But that's the way that is on that one. They keep that stuff quiet. Question number 3, Adam from Grand Rapids. He says 2 questions. If Michigan State wins the toss, do they want the ball or do they want to kick off? If you're Michigan State, what are the advantages for both? I'll throw that out to the masses. Go ahead and put on your comments over here and tell me what you would rather do. If you win the toss, would you rather take the ball or go on defense? This year more than ever, that's become something that Michigan State fans have debated, talked about, because quite often Michigan State has won the toss, kicked off, and given up a touchdown on a drive. They're down 7-0. Then they punt, and then they're down 14-0. Then they get a safety, and they're down 16-0 against Washington. Something like that. Against Ohio State, Michigan State, I think kicked off, and Ohio State scored right away, right? Michigan State kicked off against Maryland. Maryland scored right away. Wisconsin scored on their first drive, pretty sure. I'm not. I think you go into the game and you say, "Man, we're good. We're gonna be fine. We want the ball at the beginning of the second half." If you start taking the ball to begin a game, I don't know. Iowa has done that in the past, but if you're doing that because you don't want the other team to score right away, I guess it's kind of aggressive to take the ball first, but you're indicating that, and it doesn't matter what you indicate, but that to me, that's a sign of weakness. Signs of weakness don't mean anything either. But if I go into a game and I think I'm good, I'm like, hey, we'll kick off, play defense, and we're going to stop you. You're going to try to run it. We're going to stop you. You're going to throw in a completion. We're going to get the ball back, and we're going to work. It hasn't worked out that way yet, but Michigan State's defense is a little bit different now. I understand they're going against the best offense they've seen thus far this year, for the most part. So if I win the coin toss, I want the ball to begin the second half. Might be a blowout by then, might be a moot point, but that's my answer. Doesn't mean I'm right. Does not mean I'm right. I invite other people to post. Tell me what you think. Second question from Adam from Grand Rapids. He says, does Michigan State being injured early on in the season and dropping some games they should have won against Minnesota and Maryland, does that help them this week? He says, I believe they'd be 5-2 if they did not lose Slade and Henderson among other injuries. How much does Michigan take this into consideration when prepping for Michigan State? Maybe they overlook the injuries and expect a weaker team than we are. Well, they'll look on film and they'll see it. And they'll look on film, they'll see how bad Michigan State was against Minnesota and in some respects against, Washington. Will that make them overconfident? Maybe it will. It's up to the Michigan coaches to say, listen, these guys are getting people back. They're going to be tough. Believe me, they're going to look better than they are on film. Next question is whether the Michigan players will believe it. Yes, Michigan lost 2 in a row to Michigan State. They should be extremely motivated to win this game. But these Michigan players really think they were the better team last year. They think last year was a fluke that Michigan State won. They think they should have blown Michigan State out. So even though they've lost 2 in a row, they still don't respect Michigan State. So last year, I'm thinking that they may not even take that into full account. Secondly, when they look on film, Michigan State will look terrible to them. So to your point, eschewing the rat poison could be difficult for Michigan this week. That's something that their coaches are going to try to combat, and that's why Michigan coaches like to have some bulletin board material to work with. And they've got some from Henderson and what he said last year. And Henderson didn't disrespect them as players. He was just he was disrespecting the chatter. Braylon Edwards, Chase Winovich, some of those guys. Going all the way back to what Mike Hart said in 2007. So he wasn't really saying, he didn't disrespect the current players at Michigan. Now, can they construe that any way they want? Probably they can. Anyway, you mentioned that Michigan State lost some games they should have won, Minnesota and Maryland. Even if Michigan State were healthy that day, I think Minnesota was good at that time. Minnesota has come unraveled since then. The running back was injured against Purdue and they lost. But they were having trouble stopping Purdue point blank in that game. and Minnesota lost to Penn State. They were probably going to lose at Penn State anyway, but Tanner Morgan didn't play, which took away Minnesota's balance and really put a dent in that game. But a good point on your behalf that they might not respect Michigan State enough, and Michigan State, if you're a Michigan State fan, that's what you're hoping for.
Call from
Big Movie.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press.
All right, let's go out to Big Movie. Ron Armstrong, card-carrying Spartan dog. We appreciate him coming into Spartan Mag live tonight. It's rivalry week, Michigan State versus Michigan. I know Big Movie's working hard, and he's tired, but he's got his helmet in his arm, and he's ready to work, and he's punching in and out of Spartan Mag Live. I appreciate you coming on the show, Ron. I know you're tired. We appreciate your time. How you doing, Ron?
Hey man, pretty good. How's it going, man? Hey, like you said, you touched on this. It's rivalry week, man. You put extra tape on. You get the ankles taped up, and you get after it. So let's get it.
All right. So you've been watching some Michigan film, I'm sure, watching them all season. Of course, you're an expert on Michigan State football. We've talked about the importance of stopping the run. I've been talking about that for a week and a half. Everybody knows the usual keys to victory and those type of things. When you and I have talked before, you've talked more about pass protection for Michigan State being a key. Definitely, with Michigan, you want to stay out of third and long. That's the case for any team. But Michigan really ramps up the pass rush on third and long. Michigan's pass rush on first and second down, to me, doesn't seem so dynamic. But you're not taking anything for granted. You want to see Michigan State improve in pass protection, and you're not really sure about that area of the game, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts on pass protection against Michigan's pass rush?
I think you touched on it, and third down, they do a really good job of isolating, getting guys ISO'd up that they want to have one-on-ones, and they show a bunch of different looks that, and they do a good job of confusing the, offensive line with where the guy's coming from and showing multiple fronts. And quite honestly, they got a couple of guys that just can, they can rush the passer. They're pretty good at getting after the quarterback. So yeah, you definitely want to stay out of the third and long. And we have to be really sharp on our blitz pickups and just in general up front. We really have to make sure we're not giving up any free runs. And I imagine there's gonna be some crowd noise. So yeah, that offensive line, man, I think that's the you could say it every week, but most especially this weekend, that's the unit, man, that's gonna have to get off the bus ready to go.
What are your thoughts about Michigan's pass defense?
I don't think I watched Indiana pass the ball pretty effectively. I watched Maryland have some success. I didn't notice that they were particularly difficult to throw the ball against. It's just that they don't mind getting that group out there and letting them rush the quarterback. Now, if you can get them in some, when you spread them out, and they'll give up some throws. They're not a lockdown group. They're a little handsy. Our receivers are going to have to play through some contact, and they do that every snap. So, but I think there's a group that you can. I've yet to see their linebackers, how good they are in carrying routes and things like that. I don't think anybody's really stressed that group enough this year to come away with anything of. But I think there's some throws to be made there against that group. We just have to make sure we're protecting Thorne, and he has a clean window, and because they'll throw some some looks out there that'll confuse the quarterback a little bit with who's coming and who's dropping and whatnot. But as far as their back end guys, I think Five's a pretty good corner. Lil Handsy, he's pretty good. The rest of those guys are decent players, but there's going to be some open receivers. We didn't have any problem getting guys open last year, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's that we got to protect the quarterback.
Right, 5 is DJ Turner, and handsy here and there. They're taught that, and they do that well to an extent. But it seems to me I'm not seeing as much press from them, as much of that handsy, get on top and impede you all the way down, vertically. I'm seeing more off coverage, more zone for Michigan so far this year. Am I seeing things? Would you agree with that? They play a
decent amount of, but it's not nearly as much man single high as they were doing in years past. but they still grab a lot, and you're still gonna have to, like I said, play through contact. But yeah, they play a little bit more too high man under, where it's not a true man look. You know, they may look show a man press and bail into a 2 under, you know, a 225 man or 2 man, whatever you want to call it. You know, they'll show some quarters man. So I mean, it's not, you're not going to see a whole lot of the press single high that they used to do. And that's probably why you're not seeing them give up as many big plays over the top as, you know, they were in years past either.
Indiana with that air raid and up tempo had some success. You know, 3 receivers to one side, getting out there quickly. If you don't get 3 guys over there matching up real quick, they're throwing the bubble out there and gaining 8 yards real quick. Their quarterback, Connor Bazelak, in the first half against Michigan was 18 out of 31 for 163. Score was 10-10 at halftime. Each team had blocked a field goal at that point. I don't know if it was late second quarter or third quarter. Indiana had a touchdown taken off the board. They had one of those, I can't remember if it was a throwback screen or a slide route, but it was a pick play supposed to be completed behind the line of scrimmage to make the pick legal, but instead the receiver drifted too far downfield, got past the line of scrimmage, so the pick became illegal pass interference. And rather than a touchdown, it was 15 yards. Now it's first and goal at the 25-yard line. The play, it was executed right, but really called back on a technicality. Good call, but not the sharpest of execution. But they had the defense beat and should have went up 17-10 at that point. Michigan still was the better team, was going to come back and win. But that's just 2 games ago, and Michigan had trouble with Indiana. Now they had the Mike Hart situation. How much did that play into it? You know, the intensity of the Michigan sideline. It's debatable. That's worth discussing. We don't know. Blake Corum had a 50-yard run early in that game, down to the 1-yard line, turned it into a touchdown. But aside from that, they really kept Corum under wraps for his next 20 carries. So their run defense was good, and meanwhile, Indiana did a good job with ball possession offense through the air. How much can Michigan State take from that game in terms of offense? I'm not sure what Michigan State's offensive identity is. Of course, last year they had Kenneth Walker. They've tried to establish the run. It hasn't really happened. Some of their tailback per carry averages have not been bad. Not bad against Wisconsin. Not bad in other games. Just get behind in the scoreboard so much the run game goes away. You know, when Michigan State went and played Michigan in 2020 in the COVID year, went deep against press, Rocky Lombardi looked great. We had no signs of thinking that was coming. It was only Tucker's second game. Jay Johnson, this year has not been great for Michigan State on offense, but I think there's a chance that Michigan State might change their stripes a little bit in some fashion on offense, and they might look different. I'm not saying they're going to come out in the Duffy Doherty wishbone like 1969, but I don't want to have confidence in the unknown. But what are your thoughts about Michigan State overall and the chances of doing something similar to what Indiana did, or taking some of that and creating enough points to hang in this game?
I think with any time you're playing, a decent enough or pretty good defense, the one thing that you have to do is keep taking the free money. And what I mean by that is every team you play, there's going to be plays that they're willing to give up. And I thought Indiana did a good job of that, just taking the short throws and getting the ball out of quarterback's hand and letting the guys run a little bit.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, however that looks on Saturday, if it's short stop routes to the tight end, if it's thrown to the back out of the backfield, if it's quick slants, whatever that is, however that looks, I think it's key for us to keep taking that.
Yeah.
I know it sounds simple, but man, you would be surprised how difficult it is for offensive coordinators. Just, hey man, collect the profit on every play. If it's if it's 2nd and 7 and you get to 3rd and 4, you're winning that set of downs. And then when an opportunity presents itself, take a shot deep. But the more you make that defense play, I think you start to see that there's some plays to be made out there. You just got to be patient enough to keep taking that profit, and then when the chance, you talked about Indiana, they had the opportunity to get points, they kind of self-destructed a little bit. I mean, it's the right call. The guy was downfield, and you got to stay behind the line of scrimmage so the guys can block, and it's not a flag out there. So, to that end, we have to execute, and Coach Tucker talks about that all the time. But for me, it's Thorne, take the profit. Jay Johnson, take the profit. Fans, be okay with taking the profit. And sometimes it's not pretty, but it's always effective. And that's why Northwestern and those Purdue teams, Northwestern teams used to give us fits in the Big Ten, because they would just take the 5 yards, 5 yards, take the 5 yards, stay on the field, and every team will break down at some point. They'll have a miscommunication, a missed tackle, and folks hate the cliches, but we have some guys on scholarship too. So if you keep running plays, and one of those things break out, now you got to now it's 6 quick, and that place can get quiet in a hurry. So for our offense, man, just keep moving the chains, take what's there. Don't get impatient, don't get greedy, don't start chasing points, and don't get behind big early. That kind of hurts you. You starting feeling like you got to chase points. I thought that happened against Washington. We got behind so quickly that we started chasing big plays instead of running the offense, and things snowball from there. So maybe maybe going out there will be a learning experience for our staff, our kids, and the whole operation. But to me, that's the key. Hey, man, just keep collecting the profit, stay patient, and take your shots when the opportunity presents itself.
Peyton Thorne last year against Michigan was 19 out of 30 for 196 yards, 2 interceptions. He's played in this game before, not at Michigan Stadium in these circumstances. But for Michigan State to pull a surprise, having a veteran quarterback is a good thing. I'm not saying Peyton Thorne's been great this year. He'd be the first to admit he's not been great. But he had some encouraging moments against Wisconsin. He's got Jaden Reed back. Jaden Reed was hurt for 3 or 4 weeks. The ingredients to stay in the game and have a chance for an upset, stopping the run and having an experienced, poised quarterback. I think Peyton Thorne has the potential to show some of that poise and effectiveness, and being able to do what Jim Miller did in 1993, that type of game. Miller was a senior at that time. Peyton Thorne in this game, what's your gut on this one? Is he the type of guy that'll take what they're giving? I think Michigan State's going to come out aggressively through the air in this game. I've got a feeling.
I think with Thorne, he's played a decent amount of snaps, but I don't think he's played in one quite like this one, where they're the perceived, everything's going their way, and we're going to be down there that night. So he's going to have to keep himself calm early. Because after a few plays, you're just playing now. But I think early on is going to be the key for him to stay focused, stay locked in, don't try to do too much early. He doesn't have to feel like he's got to go out there and win the game in the first quarter, because that's oftentimes how you lose games early. But for Thorne, I think be sharp in your throws, go through your progressions, don't get greedy, don't guess. Sometimes, man, taking a sack, punting the football might be the right thing to do. So all those cliches, but in this game, it's the right, man. As long as each drive ends with a kick, we're okay.
When I look at Michigan, I'm looking at their coverages, and it's okay. It's their basic coverages like you're talking about. I can remember past years when I'm like, man, they're all over you and single high and press, and the pass rush is coming, and you don't know who's coming, and nobody's open, and that they just didn't have a chance to complete. No matter who the team is that Michigan's playing, sometimes Michigan State, there's just like nothing there, incomplete punt. 3rd and long, they're like that, but like you said, there's going to be people open in this thing. Michigan's pass defense, it's okay, but it doesn't. It doesn't. I don't find it to be confounding right now. Maybe it'll be better after a bye week, and maybe they'll tighten it up in this particular game. But Michigan's pass defense in the back 7. No one's had a ton of success. Indiana did, but they're coverages that Thorne sees every day in practice. And Michigan's got good athletes, but Thorne has some good receivers now, and Keon Coleman might be bouncing back nicely. And Trey Mosley's a veteran guy and an in-state game for him. Jaden Reed, you know what he can do. I don't really have a question here, Ron, but am I wrong to think that Thorne threw for 196 last year? They can throw for more this time.
I think, he's going to have to throw for more this time just because, you don't have the home run hitter back there that we had last year. So, back then you just had to get on base. Last year, just get on base and let K9 drive a bit. This year, I think he's going to have to throw for more. but not necessarily that they're throwing the ball 18, 20 yards down the field. We can get the ball out, out quickly and like you said, you got Jaden Reed healthy and Mosley and some of those guys get the ball in their hands and, it's a 2-yard throw and a 7-yard run. That's all to the good. And it's passing stats. So however it has to look, we need him to be efficient, be accurate, and we can't throw one to the other team. You said he had 2 interceptions last year. One was the flea flicker early on. But I thought he had about 2 or 3 that they dropped or they could have picked off.
Okay.
And I know those are, they don't count, but we start looking at how that performance goes. He had a few plays that, could have gone the other way and might have significantly changed the outcome of the game. And they were kind of early in the game. I think he settled in, the strip sack fumble that, that he was ruled down. I think he had another, I think he got fooled on a, Michigan came on, played cover 6, and he threw it right to the corner, and he dropped it. So there was a couple throws here and there that a couple plays here and there that could have really tilted that game, and you just got to stay away from those. But to your point, when you watch this team, watch Michigan, I don't see one area that they're just great at. That hey man, they're just going to come out and steamroll you in one particular area. I think they just sound across the board.
Defense or offense or both?
Both. I think they're just really sound across the board. I don't see elite defense. I see a good defense. I see sound. I see good football players, but I don't see a group that just can go out there and take you apart defensively. I see a good group of receivers. I don't see Ohio State level talent at receiver. I see a good group.
I agree with that. I touched on that. I touched on that earlier. I mentioned that earlier. That the wide receivers, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but they're not like, to use your word, elite. That's a good way to describe it. I don't see that at this point. Go ahead.
No, I mean, so they're really good across the board. This is the issue. I mean, if I'm looking at that group, they just have a lot of guys that play at the same level. There's not a ton of fall off. There's not a ton of, one group is we're putting a group in a number. One group's at 90, another group's at 70 or 60. I don't see that. They're probably all 78, 82s, whatever that, however that number looks. So across the board, they're really sound. They can play really efficiently sometimes, but when you're not elite, when you make mistakes, you can be in, teams can be in games. We talked about this earlier in the season, Kyle. First half, first 3 quarters of some of those games, other teams were in it.
Yeah.
And it was generally a mistake made by the other team that, opened the floodgates. But to their credit, when you make a mistake, they make you pay. So
they had a really good second. They had a really good second half against Penn State. Are they too full of themselves on that one?
No, because that's pretty much how their games have gone all year. I mean, for the most part, they're in a dogfight a little bit, and they'll make a play. Another team will make a mistake. They'll make you pay for it. I mean, look, this will probably bug a lot of people, but D'Antonio won a lot of games with his teams looking like that.
Yeah.
Where, you'd walk off the field and teams like, well, how the heck are they, 7-0? Because when you don't make a ton of mistakes and you take advantage of all the mistakes other teams making, you don't have to be elite. That only shows up when you play on an elite team. Then you see like, they were just pretty good. This is what elite does to pretty good. Do you know what I mean? When you play Alabama, you see what elite looks like. Elite, what elite does, they're pretty good. It looks like 47 or 49-10 or whatever the score ends up. That's what that looks like. So, but when you're a good team and you play other teams, when you're not elite, that means you can't just go out and impose your will. You play and you're in games, and if they don't make any mistakes, the game goes down to the wire.
Do you think it's easier to throw the ball in Michigan State or run the ball? Throw it, right?
Oh gosh, that's definitely. I mean, it's definitely easier for if I'm a team, that we're going out and we're going 4 wide, and we probably throw the ball 60 times.
Might be a little bit better with Henderson back, maybe quite a bit better with Henderson back. That being said, what do you think Michigan will do?
I was going to say that's the I think you're going to see them, especially if they get a lead. I think you're going to see them lean on that running game. I would like to think they learned a little bit from last year that I don't think they ran the ball nearly enough. I think they kind of got into the fools. They kind of got away from what their identity was and what made them a good team last year, and threw the ball a little too much. And that's how you give up a 16-point lead in the third quarter. You don't run enough clock. So I think you're going to see them, especially if they get any kind of lead. But there's always that guy down there in the headset. Can he just stay focused, stay out of it, just let the game, is winning enough? That's if will they be okay with winning 20-17?
No.
Then there's your answer. If you don't believe that they would be okay with winning 20-17, you got to believe they're going to throw the ball more. And I expect trick plays. I expect a trick play early. I mean, it's one thing I take that back, and I probably shouldn't, but it's one thing they're elite about. They're elite about being front runners.
Yeah.
And if they, they're elite about that, man. And they'll all high five and jump around. They have, think there's a chance they can get out early, and they're elite at that. And they'll come out with trick plays. And so I've watched games where they're throwing a trick play against the team that I thought, well, why are you running a trick play against these guys? Just line up and run your base offense. You're good enough to beat them up front. So, but
he's going to want to make statements. He's been trying to make a statement since he got there against Michigan State.
And see, that's how you lose games. That's how you lose games. Your base offense is good enough, man. You don't have to do anything. If I can, like I said, if you're not on my fastball, why am I coming off of that, man? We're just, the Nolan Ryan, the Ryan Express, man, throw the one and keep going. So if you don't think, and I don't think so either. I don't think he can help himself. I think you're going to see them throw the football and try to do all these, cute things, and we haven't even touched on the fact that I think 9 that the other quarterback kid will throw one to the other team. He'll throw a couple our way. We just got to catch him.
McCarthy.
And you can confuse him post snap.
Yeah.
He is not advanced in his pre-snap, post-snap read.
And Michigan State disguised things a lot better against Wisconsin. Of course, Wisconsin, not the most sophisticated offense, not the greatest offense, but just the fact that Michigan State could roll from one coverage to another from pre-snap to post-snap was
right.
Progress for Michigan State. So when McCarthy looks at film of Michigan State, what film is he looking at? What film is going to emulate what they're going to look like on Saturday? I don't know the answer to that. You might see Henderson and Kendall Brooks playing together for the first time in their careers.
Right.
I'd like to see that happen. That's a couple of big safeties right there.
There's a couple of physical guys out there, absolutely.
And we've never seen them
put their pads on you.
And we've never seen them play together in public.
Right. And those guys have shown they'll put the ball on the ground too. That's something that's not really talked about. But Michigan's running backs will put the ball on the ground. I think for our team, if I'm just looking at, what, we just can't panic. Tuck talked about don't flinch. We can't panic. If we get behind early, can't panic. We get ahead early, can't panic. If it's a close game, can't panic. Just stay, neutral thinking. Stay in the moment. Because one thing I know about them, I talked about this, Comp, and I said I complimented them. I said, man, this is the first time in a while I hadn't seen any of that arrogance creeping, and they just got some guys that just go about their business and play. And lo and behold, that bye week came, and you start seeing some of that stuff leak out.
Like what?
You're like, man, they just, with some of the, guys talking about they want to blow us out. And one guy pretending like he didn't know who K9 was, and he didn't remember. And, just little subtle slights, man, is so unnecessary. Just go play the game.
And if Michigan wins and wins by more than 10, they'll be, Harbaugh will turn them loose on social media again like he did 3 years ago, which I thought was despicable.
And what's interesting? What's interesting about that?
What's that?
Like, outside of their fan base that laps up everything that they say, nobody cares. Like, it doesn't move the needle. Like, man, you're yelling at the same folks, man. Like that. I don't know that even. Like, to me, it's dumb because you got to go back and play those guys again, man. So but we'll see. But that group, man, like I said, they're a good team. I don't see the if you're sound in what you do and they're sound, I think you could be in the game. I think it's a dogfight. So for us, man, if we just run a clean operation, we're going to be there in the fourth quarter. No freebies. We're going to be there in the fourth quarter, and then we'll see what they're made of.
State's chances of not giving away freebies, not turning it over on special teams, not giving up a long punt return, not throwing the pick six or interception in their own half of the field or interceptions in general, but more importantly, staying sound in the run game. You're not going to stop the run cold, but contain it. Don't give up the 50-yarder like Indiana did. Don't give up all those 70-yarders like Penn State did, of course. Last year, I think Michigan State's longest run play by a tailback might have been 19 or 20 yards once or something like that. Or maybe that was the Wisconsin game. They had one run of 19 yards. I think Michigan State's capable of doing that, playing a sound run defense game and just keeping it contained and stopping it a few times in the process. I think they're capable of doing that portion of it. I've talked about this all week and earlier in this show. You know, Michigan has played some defensive tackles. I talked to you about Iowa's defensive tackles. They're 6'5", 275, both of them. They're not as thick as Iowa defensive tackles have been in the past. Indiana had one dude that had a little trouble moving. Penn State had Mustafer, but they were so bad with gap responsibility. I think Michigan State, from inside, those two defensive tackles are going to be the best defensive tackles Michigan has played thus far this year. Maybe they'll still steamroll them anyway, but I don't think so. You know, with Derek Harmon at 320 and Barrow at 310 and Slade at 305 or whatever he is, and Hansen at about 305. Those are big guys, and they can tag in, tag out, and stay fresh. The inner portion of it, that's where the boat begins to float. I think Michigan's going to have to look elsewhere to get their yards. I don't think that part is going to – they won't be able to just like pick and choose, get yardage everywhere. That part of it is going to be a little harder than anyone they've played so far this year, in my opinion. I think that's the first building block. Then you have Windman
I
and
agree.
alignment.
We talked about that you know there's some looks that we can throw at them where we're going to be a lot bigger up front than you know that they probably have faced all year. You know, and if you just watch the Maryland film, I mean, I thought Maryland did a good job. You know, saved 3 or 4 runs that Corum had, where things leaked out. But they weren't just moving Maryland off the ball either.
No.
You're right. You're right about they faced some smaller D tackles. Man, what they're good at getting that counter with that that inside zone going where everyone and I talked to. You're probably tired of me saying it, where everyone thinks it's an outside run and they try to slip the edge, and all they're trying to do is get that that backside tackle and tight end and lead up through there. We got to spill that and run it down. But this is a game where for our linebackers, we're going to see we did some neat things with one gap and then two gapping on the D line at the same time and keeping those linebackers clean against Wisconsin. And we'll see if we can do the same thing this weekend. Now it definitely helped having Windman at the mic.
Yeah.
He was a lot more decisive in identifying things and hitting that thing at a yard downfield, not 7 yards downfield, or right at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield, even for that matter. So it was definitely a different group having. But you and I talked about this all year. When you're solid up the middle, starts in baseball. You solid up the middle, man. Your defense just gets a lot better. And having those D tackles in there last weekend and having Windman in the middle and having X back there deep. That's the first time, in some weeks that we were really solid up the middle, and I thought it showed, it paid off, immediately. That's a different challenge this week. Michigan, they don't really want to run, necessarily right inside. They like to run just kind of, off tackle a little bit. So we're gonna have to be firm on the edges. We talked about some possible things we could do there, but that front four. All those guys, we're gonna play a ton of bodies. I think this is one of those times where, you kind of end up with some, you have injuries, and by the end of the season, those injuries end up with, a bunch of depth. So we've had some guys that played that probably wouldn't have played that amount of snaps, but now you look up and, it's a positive for us. So, we're gonna need 10, 12 good plays from Michael Fletcher. We're gonna need 7, 8 good plays from Dunn. We're gonna need 10 plays from here and there from Brandon Wright. And you talked about the interior guys. We're gonna need all hands on deck. And I think because they played so much earlier in the year, we're not asking a guy who's coming in cold and hadn't played much all year to suddenly come out and play some winning football for us in a hostile environment. So that group, we're gonna be able to play 9, 10 guys that have played quite a bit of football this season for us. And if we can keep those interior guys, snap counts, under 40, I think you're going to see some fresh guys that are, that are able to, be firm inside and win as many as they lose.
Did you happen to see the press conference video of Heartland Barnett and what he said a couple days ago? A lot of it was kind of generic football stuff, but he was trying really hard not to say anything inflammatory. He had to keep checking himself. He says, "I keep going." He said it at the microphone. He's like, "I just keep going through my head. No billboard material," as he calls it. Bulletin board material. He was like, "No billboard material." No, and he's like, "You almost got me in there. I almost said something, but I didn't." But you could see the intensity. Now, he doesn't have to play on Saturday, does not have to play on Saturday, but in terms of keeping the lion in the cage, he was having trouble keeping the lion in the cage at the press conference on Tuesday. But the intensity for both sides, of course, is, off the charts this week. And it always is for Michigan State for this game. It needs to be that way for Michigan, too. But just being around some of those players this week, and Barnett and Tucker, no surprise to you, Ron. You've been in the program. You know what it's about. Might be a surprise to some outsiders, but Michigan State fully expects to win this game. I'm not saying there was like a cockiness or confidence. There was a feeling I was getting from these guys like, man, we're just going to get our work done this week, and on Saturday, we're going to be tough to beat. I promise you. That was kind of what, they didn't say that. Maybe it's my imagination, but they're expecting to win this game.
I talked to some folks who said that, this is as healthy as we've been since week 2. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what that results in on Saturday. But I do know that there's some confidence in that we're going to finally look like, have a chance to look like a team that, they thought we'd have coming out of camp. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, man, I don't think anybody's going into this game feeling like, that's, that we could play our A game and it still wouldn't be enough against that group. I don't think anybody believes that in our building. So, there does seem to be some belief that, things were trending in the right direction at the right time for this game. You and I talked about this. If we had been, if that team that showed up against Minnesota was at week 4, it's we don't look anything like that. Let's just put it that way. I don't think we're the same team. I saw some, even when you lose games, folks sometimes don't notice the improvement. I've talked about that. I thought defensively since the second half of Maryland game, we were a lot more sound at some of the things we were doing. And then, last week I saw some guys making plays on the ball. Like I said, there was just a little bit of growth that took place over those, last few weeks, that even when you didn't win the game, you could still see the improvement. And the one thing that I saw, man, I saw kids fighting still. I didn't see anybody mailing it in. And as long as you have that, then you add, some key players back, you're returning from injury, you get a bye week to get a little bit more healthy. You clean up some of your, you identify some of the things that, maybe you weren't doing so well, and maybe things that you had in that you just can't execute, and you get those out of the game plan, and you look up and you start feeling good about yourself. So, yeah, man, I think the confidence is a quiet confidence in that group, and it should. I mean, it should be. They should have that belief that they can go out there and get a W.
What do you think about guys, before I let you go, it'll be the first Michigan State game for guys like Jalen Berger, Amir Speed, Daniel Barker, even Jacoby Winman. There were some transfers last year that did a great job, including Kenneth Walker and Jarrett Horst had some struggles here and there. But Barker, a guy that looked great on opening night, he's kind of just been okay since then, had some mistakes, some key mistakes and key moments in other games. He has the ability to step up and make an impact on this game. His snaps are down to like 20 per game, 25 per game right there with Carr and Tyler Hunt. But Berger, played with a lot of tenacity against his old teammates at Wisconsin. Can he do that again? Can Amir Speed, stick his nose in the fan like you like to say? What do you expect from those guys, and how important is it for those guys to play at a Michigan State level, even though they've never been in this game before? What are they walking into? I think
for those particular guys, having a bye week was a pretty good good set of helped them out quite a bit going into this game because they don't know. They won't know But you start to learn when you're walking through campus. I mean, it always it's kind of cracked me up when they would downplay, oh, it's just another game, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, you say that, but when when you're playing other teams on the schedule, people on campus aren't really talking to you about the game on Tuesday. But when it's Michigan week, all week, your classmates and the guy at QD when you're getting the soda, no matter where you go, folks are mentioning the game. So having 2 weeks to kind of get into it and watch film and hear from former players and hear from your teammates of how that game is, they'll have a pretty good understanding about it. But even then, they won't know until they get in that stadium and the ball's kicked and the trash talk and the pregame. It's different. But it's good that they had a couple of weeks to kind of learn about it, and I'm sure they'd heard, but they won't know until the ball's kicked off, and they get a full dose of what the intensity is from pregame. It's a different feeling, it's a different game, and I think they'll be ready, but just they don't know what they don't know. Put it that way.
Right. I can't think for sure, but it seems like when Michigan State has a bye week before this game, they come out really strong. I think last week was one of those times. Maybe there's other times when they haven't, but both teams, of course, have a bye week. I think in this instance, can't prove it. I don't know what's going to happen to the game, but 48 hours out, I think the bye week helps Michigan State more than Michigan. Michigan State's a team that's trying to get healthy, but Michigan State had that big win against Wisconsin. Now they're feeling good. Now they're having just a different pep in your step for practice after you've done that. They had 3 days last week to get ready for Michigan. And Tucker said, yeah, we began prep last week. He didn't hide it. We worked on things. And the way Michigan runs those gap plays and pulls people and gets extra bodies to the point of attack, which adds gaps at the point of attack, seeing it, linebackers reading the triangle and get over there and fitting it, might take more than a couple days of practice to get that up to a level where you can contain them. They got those extra days, even if it's just walkthroughs. I think that helps with run defense. Michigan, meanwhile, just played their best half of football against Penn State. A lot of teams will say sometimes they don't want to have a bye week if they're playing really well. They want to keep rolling. I'm sure Michigan had some guys banged up and bruised up. Everybody does at this time of year, and I'm sure they welcomed having a week off. But that Michigan machine was rolling pretty good against Penn State, and that's maybe not the best time to have that bye week. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Michigan will just gain more traction and come through with even more powerful speed and strength and everything in this game. I don't know. But through watching football for decades and decades, my hunch is the bye week feeds into Michigan State and what they needed quite a bit, and remains to be seen what it does to Michigan. But I think the bye week helps Michigan State. Might be wrong, but that's my read right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that in the sense that we got a little bit extra time to get guys healthy and have those guys practice as a unit for the first time in some time. So
yeah,
that's guys out. Now you got all 11, all 22.
Yeah, because Windman is still new at middle linebacker. They're still getting used.
Right.
Brooks and Henderson have not played together. Maybe they're going to play together now.
Right.
Getting those extra reps. That's
for sure.
This team is still under construction.
Right. So for sure that helps us. Now to your point about them, I don't know if it's that much of a detriment. Just they're not a rhythm passing team where the quarterback gets on a roll and the ball doesn't hit the ground. I think the way they play, I don't think it would be much of a. The only thing for me is, will they outsmart themselves with this much time? Off to try to start tinkering with stuff. I think if they were good where they were, I think more time off, they might start trying to do too much. So they might spend too much time putting in wrinkles here and there that they didn't necessarily need to. So that could happen. But as far as the way they play, they don't do a ton of stuff that I think would be impacted by their rhythm being thrown off. Now that quarterback still hadn't played a whole lot of football, so he might be a little amped up early and come out throwing the ball high. And I talked to you about it, but I still don't think he throws the ball to the left side outside the numbers well. The ball sails on him, but we'll see if that becomes a factor on Saturday.
All right, and Jay Johnson needs to have a good game. His season, he has not had Kenneth Walker, but he's, there's no identity there with Michigan State on offense. They didn't have Jaden Reed for a while. But this game, he's done well in the Michigan game his first 2 years. And, we talked about Peyton Thorne. He needs to do well. Offensive line obviously needs to do well. Pass protection, all that stuff. Jay Johnson also needs to, I don't know what it might be, but they need Jay Johnson to have a good game as an offense coordinator with play design and play calling and all those things. And he knows that, and they're going to need that. Anything else, Ron?
Yeah, just to put a button on that. Just go into that game. Think players, not plays. Players.
Daniel Barker.
If you're Jay Johnson, players, not plays. Like, hey, you got some playmakers.
Yeah.
They have to be the hero, not the play call.
Yeah. All right, it's going to be a game. Right. I think Michigan State's going to show up and do some good things. Ron, I'll let you go. I really appreciate your time. I know you're tired. Thanks for checking in and talking to us. A lot of the fans here wanted to hear from you. I appreciate you checking in, and you have a good, safe week. And best wishes going into an important weekend for Michigan State fans all over the world.
I'm going to go green.
All right, thanks, Ron. There he goes. Ron, Big Movie Armstrong, a good friend of mine and a good contributor to everything we've got going on over at SpartanMag.com, and we really appreciate his insight, his time, and all those things. Let me get back over here to the mailbag, see where I left off, if I can find it. Let's see. We were at question. We had some good questions this week, so I want to make sure I don't miss any. All right, Jim from Grand Rapids, question number 4. He says, Michigan has many ways to beat you, but do you believe the loss of tight end Eric All for Michigan might impact Michigan's offense to a greater degree than has been discussed here and on message boards in particular? He says, you did put what seemed like an appropriate emphasis on it during the VCast yesterday, but beyond Schoonmaker, Honigberg's role seems similar to that of a Yackel, and the depth behind him is fairly untested from what I've gathered. I would agree with that, Jim in Grand Rapids. I think Eric All is a difference-making type of tight end. Schoonmaker is a 6'6", 250, good big target, reliable. For a big guy at 6'6", 250, he has real good quick feet on the quick out. And McCarthy has hit him. He's number 2 in the team in receptions. Schoonmaker is good hands. He's a possession guy. He's not a guy that's going to just attack the seam. He's not Jeremy Tooman that's just going to take off. And he's not that fleet of foot on the counter boot, what they've called the waggle in the past. I mean, they'll run follow concepts against zone where, it's a couple of shallow crossing routes where one's following the other. And if it's zone, then somebody's going to come into the window at some point. They like to run that stuff. Schoonmaker's good, but he catches it. He's kind of a chain mover type of guy. He's all right. But Schoonmaker and Honigberg, is one thing. I've seen Max Bredesen more in recent games. Bredesen had 33 snaps against Penn State. Bredesen, number 82. He's a former walk-on. 6'2", 232 sophomore from Wisconsin. 6'2", 232. Not a big tight end. He had a 50-yard pass, I think, against UConn or Hawaii or something in garbage time. Or maybe that was Colston Loveland, the other one. He's a freshman, 6'5", 237, who has a good future probably, but his playing time is limited because he's a freshman. And it looked like against Indiana, Colston Loveland, number 18, ran the wrong route, ended up too close to Ronnie Bell on a 3rd and long in the red zone late in the first quarter against Indiana and kind of fizzled that play out. But mainly it's been Bredesen, 232 pounds, not a big tight end. So the combination of Schoonmaker and Bredesen is not nearly what the combination would be if it were Schoonmaker and All. I agree. Not having Eric All, if you're Michigan State on defense, you're like, okay, that's a break for us. We don't have to deal with that guy and Schoonmaker. So, and as much as McCarthy throws underneath, Schoonmaker gets a lot of those. But I agree. I think your point is well taken. Tight end, they took a dent there when All's not playing for them. Question number 5, Jim from Temecula, California says, I'm worried about stopping the outside running game. I feel Michigan State might be able to contain their inside running game between the tackles, but their wide receiver jet sweeps, wide receiver reverses, and J.J. McCarthy running outside. I worry about Michigan State's defense will get gashed at times by this. What are your thoughts? Good point. J.J. McCarthy with his footwork, he is quick. You've seen it. He's quick to scramble to run, especially throwing to his right. is excellent with that. There are a couple times against Iowa and Indiana and Penn State where third down, he's reading, gets out of trouble, play is solved, might even hold it too long, but runs and gets the first down, moves the chains. Quick feet, smart feet. Maybe not smart feet yet, but he's athletic, and that just compounds the problems of trying to stop them as an offense. Because you have to pick your poison, run or the throw game, and their pass game is not completely explosive yet. It might become that way next year or maybe Saturday, but it's not been that yet. But then he's got the footwork too, which makes all of it hard to stop. I remember seeing him at one of the football camps, and he had a big reputation. But every single Michigan State commitment ever always has a big reputation. They all do, even the ones that don't pan out. Most of them don't pan out. But you commit to Michigan, you're a 4-star, and you're the next great one. He was in that category. And I went to camp one time expecting him to look like, Alex Malzone or all these number of quarterbacks who haven't done real well. They've had a couple good ones here and there. But I saw him, and not so much throwing, but I remember one time after some drills ended, he was coming off the field, and he did like a round-off back handspring back summy. And I was like, okay, this guy's an athlete. You hear about, you hear that he had some athleticism. I saw him do like a gymnastics maneuver, and I was like, okay, all right, that guy's a little different. That had nothing to do with his ability to process and make throws. He can make throws too. Processing is still a work in progress, but he's a talented kid. There's no question about that. And you mentioned his ability to run it. That is that's something Michigan State needs to keep an eye on. Obviously, Michigan State does not have a great pass rush. When Michigan State played Maryland, I thought Michigan State was doing the Harlan Barnett, Narduzzi D'Antonio, Denard Robinson theory of we're going to pass rush him and put a fence around him and just not let him out and make him throw from the pocket. Will Michigan State have that? And I didn't verify that was the plan, but it sure looked like it to me. You didn't want to chase that guy into a play and let him out. With McCarthy, with some of his third down scrambles, might Michigan State do that type of thing as well? Make sure you keep the fence around him, make him throw from the pocket. Maybe so. I think that's one way to handle that. And Michigan State as a program has done that in the past, and some of the people from the past are still with the program now. The outside stuff, yeah, they love to run the jet sweeps and end around, especially in the red zone. Ronnie Bell had like a 15-yard touchdown, I think, against Indiana in the red zone. So your corners, Brantley, speed. They've got to set the edge and get off blocks. Tucker talks about the importance of showing your team a good indicator of your physicality or lack thereof as a team is how physical your wide receivers and your corners are. Michigan plays the same way. Their wide receivers block pretty well. And the way they do things, they get tight ends out on defensive backs with some of those. Some of those end arounds, they don't come from jet sweep with a guy in motion. A lot of times their end around is when the wide receiver is tight to the formation. Like just you have the tight end or maybe an H, and then the wide receiver is right next to the H. And they get the snap and might fake a handoff inside, and here comes the end around the other way. A lot of times it's to the short side, and those are quick-hitting plays that are boom, boom, snap, fake, and now you got the end around, and it's going, and you better get to the corner before they do. It's not some elongated, long jet sweep in motion. Then they give it to them. So they've been doing it that way for years. So, getting off those blocks over there. Brantley's a little guy. He's a good, pretty good cover guy. He's a willing hitter. He's got a lot of heart, but defeating blocks is not a strength of Charles Brantley. It may never be. He's only 170 pounds. That's a weakness. You're worried about that? I think that's a concern. I agree. We talked about that on this show last week. Edge toughness for Michigan State's key in this. If Michigan State can spill those things and get two safeties over the top, helping on time, that can help. But you're right. It's hard to stop it, and that's a concern. Question number 6, Tony from Northfield, Michigan says, is this team, Michigan State, as bad as their record? He says, after the Wisconsin game, I realized just how crippling the injuries were. I can't help but think a 3-4 team won't be taking the field Saturday in Ann Arbor. I agree with that. Michigan State is not a 3-4 team right now, I think. Now, it's just one game against Wisconsin, who's not a great team. But that being said, I think Maryland's pretty good, and I thought Minnesota was good on that day, and Washington was good on that day, and Ohio State's very good. So Michigan State could have been a good team and still lose all 4 of those games, but not as bad as they looked against Minnesota. I'll give you that. And we continue to learn more about this team as the current configuration on defense takes the field more often. Slade back, Xavier Henderson back, Windman, a middle linebacker, completely different team with those three. You get Henderson and Kendall Brooks together playing safety. Talked about this today a number of times. That could look different. Jaden Reed missed the Washington game. He was not 100% against Minnesota. He's back and healthy, looking more like himself. That's a key thing, too. A lot of teams have injuries, but Michigan State obviously had some key ones, especially from a communication standpoint. Darius Snow was going to have a great year this year. He might have eclipsed Xavier Henderson and become the best defensive player on the team this year. I think he was looking that good. Don't have him. That hurt. Question 7, Kurt from Freeland, Michigan. He says, hey, Jim, what is your Halloween costume this year? I think you and Paul should go as each other. Somebody said that me and Paul should go as the two guys that drive at the Sonic commercials. I'm not sure that's a compliment. But no, I'll be Joe Paterno this weekend. No, I won't. People used to say I should. I'll do that one of these days. Once upon a time, I was Jeffrey Feiger for Halloween. There was a wig, and I just put it on backwards, and I wore a suit, and I was Jeffrey Feiger. Question number 8, Jameson from Milwaukee. He says, is it more likely we can stop Michigan's run game and stall the offense out in a lower scoring game, or that we have the horses in the pass game for some big plays on offense that allow us to score, say, 33 points, which is enough to beat them? All right. I think it needs to be a combination of both. I think you need Michigan to get too overly concerned with running the ball, and you need the clock to run, shorten the game, and Michigan State contain the run, and Michigan not to get explosive points out of their running time, so to speak, riding time. And you hope that all adds up to like 23 points for Michigan. And for Michigan State, you hope you have a couple good drives, maybe a special teams play, a couple of turnovers, and you're down, 24-21 with a minute and 5 left. Am I shooting too low by saying you hope you're just down by not much in the last minute? All right, heck, hope you're up 10 with a minute to go. But to your point, I don't think Michigan State can win this game in a shootout. I think they're going to need Michigan to, needs to be a little bit of a rope-a-dope thing. You want Michigan to attempt 30 ground plays and not get more than 150 yards rushing. Run the clock. That's my thought on the most likely non-fairy tale path to competitiveness in this game. Question number 9. Michigan State has not had a reliable kicker in years, my man says. Is it lack of focus in recruiting? That's from Rod in Arizona. Well, last year they had Matt Coughlin, and he was injured late in the season, but Coughlin had a pretty good career. I think he left Michigan State as Michigan State's all-time leading scorer. Last year Michigan State recruited Jack Stone, and relying on him to come in as a true freshman to be the kicker was a little risky. They went and got Ben Patton, transfer from Auburn. Ben Patton competed for the kicking job during training camp in Auburn, did not win the job, came to Michigan State. I've not asked Ben about that. I suspect some of that chatter might have been in the works all through the spring and summer, because relying on Jack Stone as a true freshman, and I don't think Jack Stone was the primary kicker in high school for his school in Texas. He had like 3 field goals as a senior. I think he was a kickoff guy, and some other dude was doing field goals. If you watch some of their game accounts from last year, which was strange. He'd already committed to Michigan State. So when they had Stone as a true freshman, I was thinking, why doesn't Michigan? It seems like Michigan State should be able to go into the portal and get a kicker from somewhere to come in and compete. Some guy from Temple or something. But I suspect they were talking to Ben Patton. And Patton had some good moments at Auburn. There was an injury there, and he finished out the season for Auburn last year. And he hit a 49-yarder in overtime against Alabama. It doesn't come any more pressure-packed than that. Not even the Super Bowl, probably. I don't know. So I would have liked to have seen Patton get that kick away at the end of the Wisconsin game. Michigan State probably would have gotten more out of it if they'd won that game on that field goal rather than surviving the overtimes. Although in the overtimes, Jaden Reed re-solidified himself as just a great primetime warrior, as Nick Saban used to say. But it would have been better for the psyche of Ben Patton and the whole operation to have had a game-winning field goal in overtime from the kicker. And instead, they screwed up the snap. Will the snapper be back, Hank Pepper? I don't know, but they need him back. Question number 10 says, this is from Taylor in sunny Los Angeles. He says, thanks for the exceptional coverage and in-depth X's and O's analysis. Keep up the good work. Thank you. So that wasn't a question. That was just a comment. Thank you, Taylor in sunny Los Angeles. Question 11. Can you get Big Mooby on SpartanMag Live tonight? We did have him on already tonight. What percentage do you think Mooby will give the Spartans to rush? I wish I'd had this. Sorry, man. I should have had this question before I had Mooby coming on. I appreciate the question. Sorry I didn't get it. Question is, what percentage do you and Mooby give for the Spartans to rush for more than 100 yards and hold Michigan to less than 200 yards? If Michigan State can do that, then it will force J.J. McCarthy to win a pressure game in the second half. That's from Mike in Macomb. He says, go green. Interesting numbers. Chances for Michigan State to rush for more than 100. You know, if it's a competitive game, the tailbacks will get more carries. If Michigan State gets behind early, then that gets out the window. I'm going to say more than a 50% chance they rush for more than 100. That doesn't sound like high in the pie, high in the sky expectations. What did Michigan State... I mean, they've had a string of games where they didn't, where of course they've run for very, very little. I should know this off the top of my head, but I do not. I thought Michigan State had some good moments in the ground game against Wisconsin, but ended up with 99 yards rushing. The tailbacks had 102 yards rushing on 20 carries. So that's 5 yards a pop. That's productive. Berger's long was 12 yards, and that was a touchdown. Broke a couple tackles there. If you're going to have good numbers in the ground game, you kind of need to clip off that 40-plus yarder, and Michigan State has not been getting that. But 5 yards a carry was solid against the Badgers. My bad. It was 30 carries, not 20. I thought 5 was a little bit too much. So they didn't average 5 yards a carry against Wisconsin. It was more like it was less than 4. But you know, they moved the ball well enough in that game to make them honor the run, which helped the passing game. Michigan's rush defense has been statistically real strong this year. More than 100. You know, part of the problem with Michigan State's ground game in amassing 100 yards is whether their defense can stop Michigan. If they can't, then the run game goes out the window a little bit. I'm gonna retract that. More than 100 yards. I'm going to put that right at the 50-50. I think that is the over-under for Michigan State rushing in this game, 100 yards. And a lot of Michigan fans will say it's going to be the under, and they might be right. Holding Michigan to less than 200 yards rushing. I'm going to say Michigan State has a... Now, you're right there. I'm going to say Michigan State has a 58% chance of holding Michigan to fewer than 20 yards rushing. Great questions, though, and those numbers are going to have a huge impact on what the scoreboard looks like. Question 12 from, I didn't put his name here, from Parts Unknown. He says, what does the running back recruiting board look like now that Risano has decommitted from Michigan State? You know, Kedrick Risano, number 184 recruit in the country from Texas, running back, committed to Michigan State, I think during the summer, decommitted from Michigan State today. We were expecting that to be the case. Michigan State they had a Zoom meeting with him a couple days ago, tried to head it off, make him realize how appreciated he is and what they can do for him here. He's still decommitted nonetheless. But Risano says that Michigan State's still going to be one of the schools that he considers. We'll see what happens with that. But in the meantime, Michigan State has been recruiting others, knowing that this was kind of a possibility. And Michigan State's been recruiting others that are committed elsewhere. Noah Sprunger had a story on that at SpartanMag.com today, and he talked about Jeremiah Cobb, who's committed to Auburn. He's a kid from Montgomery, Alabama. He's number 150 in the nation. Now, will Auburn undergo a coaching change in the coming weeks? Everybody suspects that'll be the case. Auburn will go out and try to hire some, big heavyweight replacement. But everybody thought that when they fired Gus Malzahn. They went out and got Brian Harsin, who was a good coach out of Boise State. But from the get-go, the locals there were giving him a hard time, and he kind of had a strange staff and so forth. But, they fired Gus Malzahn. They need to go to the board and say that we fired Gus Malzahn. They need to do that 100 sentences. The one big wig donor that they have there that wants to fire everybody all the time. Anyway, Jeremiah Cobb's a guy from Alabama, but Harsin gets fired, there'll be other schools trying to get in on Jeremiah Cobb. But Michigan State's been in there with him, and they visited him during the bye week. Tucker and Ephraim Reed, Michigan State's running backs coach, both went down there. Trayon Webb is another one. He's a bigger back from Jacksonville, Florida. He's committed to the Gators. It's going to be harder to get him to shake loose, but Michigan State's been snooping around with him, trying to shake him loose a little bit. He's a 4-star guy. Darius Taylor's an interesting one. He's a 3-star commitment to Minnesota. He's from Walled Lake Western, 5'11", 185. He's rushed for 2,100 yards, 32 touchdowns this year. You watch his film, and he's got real smooth, easy glide speed. He goes. The level of competition could be a little iffy here and there, but he's got legit speed. His cutting ability doesn't seem to have to use it very much, but if you watch enough of his film, you will see him cut a few times. He's got some cutting ability. I've not seen him, whether he can lower his shoulder and move a pile a little bit, but the speed is good. Reminds me a little bit of a Jeremy Langford type of situation. He's committed to Minnesota. Michigan State's been in there a little bit. Tucker and Reed went and visited his high school during the bye week. So Darius Taylor from Walled Lake Western is an interesting one. There's an under-the-radar guy that Noah Sprungen wrote about his name named Jalen Barberin from West Hills, California. And he's a guy with legit 10.4, 10.3, 100-meter speed. Like I said, kind of a late bloomer guy, but Michigan State's looking to add some speed. That would be an interesting one. I think I could see Michigan State getting a running back and then adding that guy. Just get a little speed guy, get a little, just put it on the roster. Maybe he can come to the forefront somewhere sometime. Also, Noah Sprungen wrote about T.J. Harvison, another bigger back type guy, 6'1", 200 from Bowden, Georgia. He's rushed for 800 yards this year. Now, he's uncommitted. He's got offers from Kentucky, Ole Miss, Virginia, and some others. So Michigan State's in there with him. So those are some, and we'll keep our ear to the ground on others now that the running back situation has taken a hit with Risano decommitting. I always thought it was Riscano. Then I heard it was Riscano. I've heard some news accounts out of Houston that is Risano. I've never confirmed it with him or others. I should have. That's my fault. I apologize. Question 13, Doug from Dowagiac says, Jim, when D'Antonio was the coach, there seemed to be a lot of animosity between Coach D'Antonio and Jim Harbaugh and the staffs. Is there that same level of animosity today, or has Harbaugh cooled his jets just a little bit? We'll probably find out a little bit more on Saturday on that one. I do think Harbaugh, we got to see what happens when he wins a game. Like, Harbaugh is very childish, and if Michigan wins this game, you'll probably hear him say something stupid and gloat and just be an all-around bad representative of college football. Tucker and Harbaugh, I don't think they really acknowledge each other very much. I don't think there's animosity. The more that they're against each other in the coaching ranks, that's probably going to spark up here and there. But I sense that there's a lot of coaches out there that don't really want to ruffle Tucker's feathers. But you're right, there was a lot of that between D'Antonio and Harbaugh, but there's not that with Tucker and Harbaugh right now. Between Harbaugh and Michigan State University, there is, and there always will be. But if he keeps losing, he won't be able to do much about it. Question number 14. Are you hearing only good vibes about Akins' injury and his return? Talking about basketball, Jaden Akins. I was at practice today. Jaden Akins was in practice gear. He's gotten on the court a little bit for Michigan State. He's got wraps on the leg situation, the knee. He's not full go, but he's back in practice gear. Made a couple free throws today. They had a pressurized free throw situation. You have to make 8 out of 10 or the team runs. And he was in there and he hit a couple. So he's on, and Izzo says he's on schedule to return pretty soon. Not in time for the exhibition game for Grand Valley, and not in time for the aircraft carrier game against Gonzaga in San Diego. But soon thereafter, Akins is going to be back on the field, on the court, coming back gradually, and that'll be good to see. That's a good kid right there. He also asks, are you guys cheek to cheek in the press box, just like the rest of us patrons at the Big Hole? The answer is no. There's enough room in the press box there. It is off to the side, though, a little bit now. It's not like in the middle. I have trouble remembering. That's a good press box. And he says, does the press cheer for the Wolverines in the press box like we all imagine? No, they don't cheer. They do not cheer. It was interesting to be up there in the press box when the cluster punt happened in 2015, the trouble with the snap play, because it happened and it was just kind of quiet in the press box. And Jalen Watts-Jackson has the ball down the sideline, and I'm thinking, I'm saying to Konendijk, I'm like, he needs to get out of bounds. He needs to get out of bounds because there's a chance he'd get tackled before the goal line and Michigan State would have lost. If he runs out of bounds at the 10 and there's still time left, because he's looking up the scoreboard, he probably didn't. There was a lot going on to process there. He probably couldn't check the clock. He did the right thing, and it was a great play, heroic play. I don't know. I wonder if the better thing to do would have been to run out of bounds if there's still 2 or 3 seconds left at maybe the 15-yard line and kick the field goal. But the field goal probably would have been blocked, right? Or you'd have missed it. So Jalen Watts-Jackson put the cape on, took matters into his own hands. Turned out to be the right decision. Probably was the right decision. But right after that happened, it was just quiet. It's quiet in the press box. The stadium is like, 10% of the stadium is going crazy. The other 90% is just like buzz, a zombie apocalypse. It was quiet in the press box. And I don't even know if Matt remembers this, but Matt Charbonneau was there. He's a fine beat writer for the Detroit News. Matt says, like after the play happened and they're celebrating the end zone, just quiet in the press box. And Charbonneau says, "What just happened?" Because it was just so bizarre. To me, that's what I remember, breaking the silence in the portion of the press box where I was. So that's what I remember about that. Also, I think I've told this story before, but, the game was over. They just had to punt, and it was overtime. So you get your, just have the one snap during the timeout. So I was like I turned around, and I was going to put my cable, like my cord for my laptop in the bag, and I was starting to get stuff together to go down to the post-game interviews. And, they were getting ready to do the punt or whatever. And I turned my back to the field. I'm like, well, this game's over. And the thought goes through my mind real quick. Well, when I was a little kid, there was this play when the Detroit Lions played the Baltimore Colts, and the Colts were really good back then with Burt Jones. This is like 1977 or so. And the Detroit Lions at Baltimore, last play of the game, put all 11 up at the line, blocked the punt. Number 39 for the Detroit Lions, Leonard Thompson, picked up the blocked punt, went and scored, and the Detroit Lions won on the last play of the game on a blocked punt. I was a little kid. And I remember my dad saying, they had all 11 guys up at the line. Of course they're going to block the punt or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not. But the Leonard Thompson play went through my head as I turned around. I'm like, well, I might as well watch the play just in case there's some sort of Leonard Thompson moment. That's what went through my head. And the first time, when I turned around, I looked back to see if anyone was deep to return the punt, and there wasn't. I'm like, they got 11 up there. I didn't realize at the time that Michigan had 2 gunners out there on ghosts because Jim Harbaugh just screwed up the timeout. During the timeout, we saw that I saw pieces of the piece that Big Ten Network put out this week, The Moment, I think it's called, when they did a story on that play. And D'Antonio said during the timeout that he talked to his guys, trash talk the snapper a little bit, so I don't know what they were saying to him. But D'Antonio was still doing what he could to try to pull that game out. He was still coaching on that last timeout, as a coach should that's trailing. Harbaugh, during the timeout, was thinking about boogers or something because he didn't get his gunners prepared for the idea that they're going to have 11 on the line of scrimmage, and if they do, they needed to come in and protect the edges. Harbaugh just flat choked that one. That's what Booby's talking about, Big Movie's talking about when he says the guy with the headsets, if he can keep his own childishness out of the game, or will he try to, wanting so badly on Saturday to get a blowout and do bully ball, will he get away from what makes sense? Now, hey, they're a well-coached team right now. He's done a great job since COVID, Harbaugh has. But, can he keep his mind off the boogers in the meantime to finish the game if it becomes a late situation? But he blew that timeout and screwed that game up at the end. But that's how I remember that game. MSU analyst from Atlanta says, in reviewing the Michigan game film, what area can Michigan State attack the Michigan State? I'm sorry. In what area can Michigan State attack the Michigan defense with the most success, considering the state of the Michigan State offensive line and tight end blocking? Well, Michigan's defense has been pretty good. Not many teams have had a lot of success. Mooby and I talked about the success Indiana had. Indiana spread 3, 4 wide, sometimes 5 wide, up tempo. It seemed to bother the Wolverines. And quarterback dished it around pretty good, threw for about 170 in the first half. I think ball control routes underneath. Experienced quarterback like Thorne, Coleman, Reed, Mosley, possession routes. Michigan State needs to get something out of Daniel Barker. You know, Hunt is solid, but he's got a ceiling on him. Malik Carr had a big play against Wisconsin. Seems like it takes a minute for his engine to get going. Barker's a guy with some playmaking ability. We've not seen it since the first or second game. I think he needs to show up in this game. His role seems to have been reduced. If you're looking for, pixie dust, he's a guy that possibly could deliver some. But like Mooby said, keep cashing checks. Keep cashing checks. If it's a little 5-yard hitch available on 2nd and 10, take it. Set up 3rd and 5. I think Michigan, they talked about it earlier in the show, they don't do as much pressure on 1st and 2nd down as they have in past years for past regimes. 3rd down, they get into press more and bring some good blitzes with some good personnel. Mike Morris, a very good player when he's not trying to choke Kenneth Walker. That was despicable. Ridiculous. Talking about last year on the bottom of the pile in the 4th quarter, he tried to choke Kenneth Walker. Never heard anything about it. Terrible. No sound. You can't hear me? Well, I'm going to wrap it up. Says there's no sound. Give me a thumbs up. The questions are over as far as okay, it's back now. All right, so the questions are that'll do it for the mailbag. But there's no really obvious weak underbelly for Michigan's defense that it's like, oh, they can attack this guy right there. I've been looking at the corners. The corners are pretty good. But I got to say, in 2020, when Michigan State was going down there to play them, Michigan State thought that they could, when and if Michigan pressed, and they pressed a lot, Michigan State thought they could test them deep, and they did time after time after time, and connected on enough to get that victory. I honestly didn't see the weakness there that Michigan State obviously did. Same thing this week. You have the Henning kid, looks pretty good. Jamon Green, the guy that's been running his mouth. Those guys are okay. I'm not seeing any weaknesses there. The safeties are okay. The safeties don't strike me as guys that really, fly over the top and destroy people, but I'm not seeing them give up plays. They're kind of pretty good. All right, what do we have here? Let's go back over here to the comments area. We're going to wrap this up real quick. Can't remember where I was, but okay. Gordon Tonona says that he cannot renew his subscription. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. So Tonona needs my email address. I don't know what the problem is there. All right. I don't know if Tanona's still with us. Gordon Tonona, let me know if you're still with us. If you're still with us, I'll put it out there. I'll get a lot of troll emails, that's for sure. Let's see. I lost my place again. Sea-Dog says, I see a 1990 type scenario on Saturday. Michigan State wins in the final play. Bob Littleton says Michigan State needs to have a strong start. Excellent. Eric, the Michigan fan, says, I think the coin toss may be important here. If Michigan State can get the ball and run a well-scripted drive and score, it's going to take a lot of energy out of the crowd and make Michigan play nervous, which usually goes in MSU's favor. Interesting way to look at it. Appreciate your insight there. Bob Littleton says, for example, say Michigan State starts off 7-0 and then gets a stop. As a Spartan, I think Michigan State should take the ball if we win the toss. Pressure is on. So Bob Littleton and excellent Eric both think that. Florida says delusional. Delusional is usually a word that goes the other way in this rivalry. Zach Colmoden says, has Michigan been down at all this season? I think was Penn State winning for a minute? I think Indiana might have been leading in the first quarter. Excellent Eric says, yeah, if you establish momentum early, that's one of the only ways I see Michigan State having a chance. He says Michigan's been down, but usually only a couple of points briefly. Bruce Main says, any word on Piotrowski returning? I'm guessing not, but I have a good feeling he plays. Your gut feeling might be accurate. Piotrowski is an okay player. They'd be happy to have him. Does he come back and make a difference? Possibly. They can use him. It wouldn't shock me if he's out there. Excellent Eric says, issue is the holes that led to Michigan losing last year were very apparent. Harbaugh is going to be putting corks in anything he thinks could leak, so I just don't see Michigan making the mistakes. Gordon Janona says Harbaugh's not that good of a coach. Bruce Main says, can't believe Cornelius Johnson is still there. Feels like he's been there for 7 years. ABC says, go green from vacation in western Pennsylvania. Gordon Janona. Paul Hodgson says, Grand Rapids here. Lamp says, Gordon Janona, you simply don't coach a team to a Super Bowl without being a good football coach. Nice try, buddy. Harbaugh's done a good job. He's been, like I said, I thought he lost the team during the COVID year. Yeah. So, I mean, Harbaugh's pretty good. He coached him to a Super Bowl, so that puts him up there with Bobby Ross. Bruce Main says Bouse, pronounced like sauce, but with a B. I got the boss part. I'm wondering about the Main. Is it Boss Main? Is that kind of like Boss Man? He's kind of like changed him. Boss Main. Tyler Ostling says, did you see the Rich Eisen take on the MSU Michigan game? Why do Michigan fans always fuel the fire? Only benefits MSU for the big game. I love the show. I did not see the Rich Eisen thing. I won't be looking for it. He's not on my radar. Doors Fan 91 says, agree. The Harbaugh isn't a good coach. Is BS. He's made staff changes and got things going. Plus, he went to a Super Bowl. Boss Main says, not saying he's a bad coach, but the team was stacked. Lost to the Ravens. Whatever. Gordon Janona says, we are not friends. That was in response to the guy that called him buddy. Randy R. says, who do you expect to start at the safety in this game? I'm expecting Henderson, and I'm just a hunch it's going to be Kendall Brooks. If Michigan comes out with two tight end personnel, I think it'll be Henderson and Angelo Gross with Brule at nickel. Personally, I want to see what Henderson and Brooks looks like together. Lamb said there's a lot of loaded teams in NFL history that don't even make the playoffs. Not sure about that. There's a lot of loaded teams that don't make the playoffs. Boss Main says, I don't think he's a bad coach. Another commentator said that, but he did get outcoached by his brother clearly. Okay, ABC says MSU pass offense should have some success with short, quick release throws first to set up the run. I agree with that. Could have something here and there, but I'll say this about Michigan. With some of those short passes, I'm not seeing guys arrive with real good, sharp, hard tackling like right now. I've seen some missed tackles on some of those. Not a lot, but just here and there. I don't think it's their best tackling secondary ever. Lamb says, you guys are too funny with your narratives. Your glorified special teams coach would crap his pants if he took over an NFL roster. Well, the glorified NFL special teams coach is 2-0 against your guy. Gordon Janona says, Lamp, are you a troll? Ray Johnson says, go blue. So I'm going to ban him. Just because you guys don't want this kind of clutter, do you? Boss Main says, not if the loaded 49ers. Okay, we're not talking about that anymore. Got a lot of 49ers talk here. Jesse Adams says, Jim, keep up the great work. My question is, do you think we will see Collins running the ball? My second question is, do you see this offense use the tight ends this week? Carr, Baker, could be mismatches. Barker. Mismatches, not sure about mismatches because Michigan has pretty good speed everywhere. Big Movie mentioned that he's not really seen the linebackers for Michigan tested a lot. Barker, I could see Barker getting loose. Haven't seen him do much lately. Carr has some ability there. But yeah, I think the tight ends, last year Michigan State hit the tight ends like 5 times, but not for much yardage against Michigan. I understand it's a different year, different team and all that, but last year Michigan State's tight ends had 4 catches for 15 yards. So 4 catches and less than 4 yards per catch on those. But yeah, I think they're going to be hitting the tight ends. I think there's underneath stuff available. Trying to get the ball moving, try to get some first downs, possession. But I think Thorne is going to hit some windows and go intermediate. I think Thorne between 7 and 15 yards. I think Thorne could live in there a little bit. I think Thorne has a good game in him. Jesse Adams says, I did see Michigan versus Penn State midway through the third quarter when it was still a game. Michigan played man cover, and Clifford overshot his wideout. If they do that with us and Reed and Coleman, we get a touchdown. Yeah, I remember that play. Yeah, Clifford was kind of scrambled in that game. Jesse Adams says he wants to win the toss and go on defense. Spartan Marinelli 87 says, upset alert this weekend. Go green, baby. We always are underdogs anyway. ABC says, win the toss, take the ball, throw short, get a couple first downs on the opening drive. C-Dog says, NIL is turning college football and basketball into a bidding war. Kind of ridiculous. Tim Hughes says, go green from Traverse City. I think that's about it. Ghosty47 says Barrow's going to have a big game on the inside. Simeon Barrow's one of the more underrated players in the Big Ten. A little bit of trash talking going on here. Ron Dooley, check mark. Nate Ciaravino says Michigan's offensive line is top notch. They weren't that great against Indiana. They were very good against Penn State. Penn State's gap integrity was terrible. Boss Main says Michigan wears teams down. Yes, they do. I think it'll be a little harder to wear down Michigan State's defensive front. Maybe not. You know, if Michigan wears Michigan State down in the defensive front and, rushes for 250, then Michigan is, in fact, the real deal. Not that Michigan State's the ultimate test, but if they can, I think Michigan State's pretty good in that area. Or they will be good on Saturday. And still, if they give up a figure, they give up a figure. Boss Main says if Michigan State got another crack at Maryland, especially in East Lansing, I think we'd win. Maybe, but Maryland's pretty good. Boss Main says watch out for Donovan Edwards, halfback pass that they used against Iowa and the Big Ten game last year. Yeah, Donovan Edwards threw a halfback option pass for a touchdown last year. Good point. Good memory. All right. I think we're about done. Doors Fan 91 says, was passing on Cabana a big mistake in hindsight? Maybe. Good running back out of Dexter, committed to Michigan. He was interested in Michigan State, but he might have ended up at Michigan anyway if both had offered it by that point. I can't read all these. We're going to wrap it up. Appreciate everybody. Oh, Stroker saying good night, Pope. So good night to Stroker. Glad you're around. It is getting late in the Eastern time zone. Appreciate everybody checking in. Pre-snap read, be writing that on Friday. Go to SpartanMag.com to check that out. Become a SpartanMag.com subscriber over there. Give us a thumbs up here. Subscribe to this wonderful video channel, Spartan Mag channel. Appreciate you coming around. Appreciate you guys spending some little time with us on a Thursday night in the middle of autumn in the year 2022. Could be an interesting game. If you think back to some of your best days in the fall season, how many of them revolve around an unexpected Michigan State victory over Michigan? Sometimes it comes as a surprise. This is one such scenario that could play out that way again. Nobody's expecting it, but you've felt that feeling before. And sometimes history repeats itself. Michigan is very good, and they're focused on not letting it happen again. And they better not bring their C game, because if they do, they're going to get caught in a tough football game. Michigan State's going to show up. They're going to be hitting hard. They're going to be correct in their gaps. Michigan might need to go to the air to get it done. Michigan State needs to hope that they can contain the run and hope that Michigan gets drawn into trying too long to establish the run. I do have a hunch that the Wolverines are going to come out scripting air in the first drive. Then when the game settles down, then what happens? Anyway, it's going to be fun to watch. Michigan's very good. Michigan State needs to play like we haven't seen them play yet, which is possible. More than likely, Michigan will take care of business. That's happened 4 times out of 14 in recent years. Different coaching staff on both sides here in the last 3 years, and Michigan State's 2-0 this particular matchup of these coaches. So they're going to kick it off and play a football game, a bunch of 22 and unders. Anyone who says they know exactly what's going to happen is wrong with a capital W. It's going to be fun. We'll watch it. Be down there covering it for you over at SpartanMag.com. Thanks for checking in, everybody. Have a great day, a great Friday, and a great weekend. Take care.